Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Season Gaming Bitcast, episode 247. I'm your host, Ainsley Bowden, and we are your weekly show covering the biggest topics in gaming with legal, technical, and industry insight. And it is a fine day to talk about a lot of games. We got a lot to talk about today, boys. Coming out of the gate, Travis, fired up, ready to go. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Your rough again is here for you. McClunky, one and all, and Hoeg. I'm sorry we lost you, Hoeg, over there. And there's a memorial frame. Yeah, nice to see you guys.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, we're starting out with Gold Frame Hoeg today. So Hoeg is he had some stuff going on this week, and he said that he was going to try to do something different this morning. So we don't know if he's going to be coming by or not. He's a maybe for today, but we'll play that by ear. But Mr. Rodriguez is here, and he's going to be our legal expert for the day.
No, I'm not.
Any questions you have from a legal perspective, direct them at Dan. We'll make sure it's on video, recorded, and take that to court if you need to.
I'll tell you all about his legal love of lesbians.
Yes.
It'll be great.
That's about the only thing I'm actually qualified to talk about, but I'm doing great this morning. I'm here and awake. I will be leaving for New York City in 2 days, and putting everything out of my mind just to relax.
You can get some real pizza. Sweet.
I can get some real pizza. I'm not even going to argue because I went last year. As much as I love deep dish, and I still think it's superior.
Stop it.
The New York has the best thin slice pizza in the world. Period. It was amazing. It was outstanding.
I have a hot
street pizza. Shout out. You're the best. Yep.
Nice. My hot take is that all pizzas have pros and cons, and you should enjoy them all.
Oh, I do.
That's perfectly fair too. Yes. Yeah. New York's great, man. I haven't been in a long time since we moved out here because I used to live less than 2 hours away, so we'd go up there quite a bit. But
now you don't live anywhere where there's more people than horses.
Right.
I would love to see inside Travis's head to picture where he thinks we live.
Yeah, you play your Xbox sitting in a lawn chair. There's a tractor going right behind you.
Fair. Yeah, fair.
People firing guns off at each other, and
you're like 5 miles away from everything that Travis just really down.
It's funny because we're 5 miles away from like anything you want, right?
Yeah.
And we're also 5 miles away from what Travis just described.
Yes, exactly.
It's all very close.
It's somewhere in the middle.
Good for you guys.
Oh man. So we've got a lot to talk about today. Actually, we got a bunch of games to talk about. There's a game we can't talk about yet. We've got another major release, sadly, that has bugs. We're going to talk about major releases continuing to release broken or unfinished. We had big news this week out of the CMA blocking the Microsoft acquisition of Activision-Blizzard. Sadly, Hoeg is not here, but Travis has stepped up and said he's going to be Hoeg today on all legal matters relating to the CMA. Any other legal matters direct to Dan, but on the CMA specifically, that's going to be Travis. We've got some reports from Xbox and PlayStation I want to talk through just in terms of figures and sales data. We've got the next game from Software getting a release date and new details, which look amazing. So quite a bit to talk through. Anyway, before we get to all of that, kind of going to start on a little somber note here. So was it last week or 2 weeks ago that we kind of commented on helping out with Secret McSquirrel, our favorite squirrel in the house, around, she was getting treated for cancer, apparently had cancer for quite a while, and was working through that. But she, continued to be a champion for, as I commented on Twitter, all of kind of LawTube, right? Not just Hoeg, but Ian and the group, and has been a big boon for us here at Bitcast and really helped out behind the scenes. And, just a genuinely good person. And I'm made me very sad this week to hear the news that she had passed. I didn't realize it was that serious. I'm sure other people who had talked to her longer kind of understood or knew that. But it is, as I said on Twitter, it's condolences go out to the family and friends. One of her good friends DM'd me and let me know, and kind of I talked to them briefly about it. And, I don't really know what else to say. I'm not very good in these instances, but it's, I said online, it's a reminder to live well and don't take anything for granted. We've had that same conversation with Hoeg recently, right? About what he's gone through. So just want to give a shout out to her, anyone who was friends with her, or knew her and kind of engaged with her. On the Season Gaming side, we have the Just Giving link at the top. It's pinned if you want to help with the funeral expenses with the family and friends to kind of take care of things. So if you can do that, that's obviously appreciated. Anyone on the Hoeg side of the house, as we're live here, if you are a moderator, you can pull that link off of the SG side. If you could pin it up on the Hoeg side. Funny enough, I don't think me, Travis, or Dan are moderators on Hoeg side. We got to give them crap about that. But if
I'm not moderators on this side.
Well, that's for good reason. But
Smart.
But if you can put it up on Hoeg side, that would be appreciated. So that's about all I'll say on that, guys. I don't know if you want to add anything. Up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I DM'd with her a little bit, just because, you get on Twitter and normally it's just full of just
vitriol.
Sludge. It's terrible, right? I mean, and then every once in a while you get somebody like her who, out of just the kindness of her heart and just promotes everything and just is always super positive and is, always, it's always consistently good, and you don't see that a lot. So I had no idea about the cancer. I didn't know anything about it. I knew she was sick. I knew she had been to the hospital a few times. So I also got I think that DM from that person, and it was after I found out from you guys, and I talked to him a little bit, and it's just, it sucks, man, because it's when you see somebody do stuff like that, it just kind of warms your heart a little bit, and I honestly don't even know what to say anymore. It's just sad. Please donate if you can. Try to help out, and pay for those expenses. She didn't have a whole lot of people, with her, so it's one person who's her best friend, and he's been that way for years, and he's trying to take care of all that and her birds as well. So anything you guys can do to help would be awesome.
Yeah, I checked it this morning, and it looks like they were trying to raise 10,000 pounds, I believe, and they were at 60 some hundred. So a lot of generosity shown already. But anything, like we said, if you can help, please do. So,
hell yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. And I know a lot of people, especially on Hoeg's side of the chat here, you knew her better than we did. She's been around with that group longer than us. So condolences.
We're definitely going to miss her in the chat. It's going to be a different whole thing. So
no doubt.
Sucks.
All right. All right. Let's jump over to this is a hard segue, guys. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Let's jump over to gaming. So what we're currently playing. So a lot of games to talk about here. I've got a few I want to talk about. Right out of the gate, I will just say that we cannot talk about Redfall yet. That will come next week.
Some of us are playing it, though.
Yes. I'm reviewing it for SG. Obviously, reviews will go up in short order. The game comes out, I think, tomorrow night, officially, as we're recording this, like late night, overnight. So
I'm not reviewing it for IGN, but I am playing it early and have thoughts.
which we as we said, we can't share. So a lot on Redfall next week, and we'll give you the full breakdown of what that looks like. But I am playing a few other games. I'll start, guys. I'm going to start with a little game called The Last Case of Benedict Fox.
Nice.
So yeah, this is an indie game that came launched on Game Pass. It came out on Thursday, I think. Came out a few days ago. Apparently, I know codes came extremely late. Codes essentially for the game came out when it launched, or the night before. Apparently, there was a problem with the build of the game. It had some severe issue right up until launch, and they didn't get codes out. And so that's why there were hardly any reviews for this game when it came out. So I did start playing it as soon as I kind of got access to it. I was going to review it prior to Redfall because it was coming out nearly a week prior, but because of the code delay, it kind of had an overlap, and now I'm behind. But I do have about, I want to say maybe 4 hours into it or so. Cool game. So if you think it's a lack of a better term, Metroidvania, it's got this kind of this kind of mystical / haunting vibe to it. It's very colorful on a 2D plane. It reminds me a little bit in terms of color and design like Ori in a way. But it's got this kind of so to give you an idea, at the start of the game, it actually says the game tackles some serious subject matter. And if you're not a fan of that, you may want to hold off. And it'll actually let you see spoilers around what they're talking about if you want to. Because it talks about death and some trauma and family issues and stuff like that. But it's pretty good so far. I was really enjoying myself. I'm playing on the Series X. I should have been playing on PC, apparently, because on the Series X, it has some stuttering problems once action gets really tight. So once you start fighting more than like 1 or 2 enemies at once or get into kind of like key scenarios, has these weird like loading hiccups where the game will pause just for a split second, but it really throws you off, like it's not smooth. And it's just frustrating. I died a few times because of it, and I'm like, I was getting mad. But other than that, I really enjoyed it so far. So I look forward to getting back to it. If I can get a review of it up in the next week or so, I will. If not, I'll probably talk more fully about it next week. But it's on Game Pass and PC, or Xbox and PC. It's also on Game Pass. And if you like 2D games with kind of a, Metroidvania style where you unlock things and abilities, check it out. It's worth your time.
Nope. So thanks, though. Appreciate you.
No interest at all?
None whatsoever.
Ironically, Dan's only salvation for his hatred of games that don't run 60 FPS is indie games. Like another type of game he doesn't like.
That's true.
All his AAA heroes are failing him, and the only chance he has for salvation is in the loving, warm embrace of smaller games, which he refuses to play.
Yeah, of a game that Ains just described as a 2D side scroller that struggles on the most powerful console in the world at times with many enemies. Kiss my grits. That's what I say.
He needs to lose weight and he hates salads. This is the situation Dan finds himself.
I love meat, though.
That was a transition.
It was a metaphor.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he actually needs to lose weight. I've never seen the lower half of him. I have no idea.
It's pretty
impressive. Could be
actually
ripped. I have no clue.
I have giant muscular thighs
without
and
his shirt on because he tweets pictures of it.
I have not tweeted without my shirt on. Stop.
Okay, well, your arms are out. Okay, you look like you're posing for a Fast and Furious character screen poster. You know.
Okay, all right. You don't have to insult me. Okay, all right.
No,
IQ's in the triple digits.
You, I would say that based on those photos, you look like you should be holding a tiki torch, which is what I think every time I see them. I'm like, this guy for sure was in a prison gang based on those photos. Not the one that likes me. You know what I mean?
Hey, I mean, I don't mind people thinking that. That's fine. Keep them away from me.
All right, there's something about the shaved head look. I don't know.
No, it's good, Dan. It really is. If you want to play AAA, high frame rate, play Halo. Halo's 120 frames on Series X.
That might be the only one out there.
Here's 4, 120.
I'm 5.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sorry, I meant 5. Gears 5 looks amazing on new Xboxes.
I can play Fallen Order actually, which is crazy.
I wonder what the frame rate is.
We're gonna get the Jedi. We're gonna get the Jedi.
Yeah,
I bet you Hitman's not 60 FPS.
100% it is.
Is it actually? I would love to look that up.
That would be hilarious, wouldn't it? If it was only 30 FPS.
I have a feeling. I bet you even if it says 60 FPS, it's not steady.
All right. I've got a couple other games to talk about, but go ahead. Someone jump in here.
I literally have nothing. I don't think I've played much. Yeah, I haven't played much this week. I haven't played in the last 3 or 4 days for sure. I don't even know what I've been playing, if I've been playing anything. Man, I think I played Miles Morales a little bit. I don't know why. That was it. That was my gaming of the week. I had some plans Friday to play something, but we'll talk about that later. So, all right. Otherwise, I'm good. Been busy.
Yeah, we're gonna save the Jedi conversation, which we'll be talking about at length, but we're gonna save that for our kind of AAA launch discussion here briefly.
Yeah, you guys go ahead.
So,
I did play.
Anything you can talk about? No, we're not talking about Hitman, Dan.
No, well, Joe said something. I did play Hitman.
You've hit your quota. You've hit your quota.
No, what?
Okay, and Ains played Halo. We can just skip past
I played
all that
Halo.
stuff, guys. Nothing.
Yeah, we're good.
Nothing's changed here. Yeah.
You play anything you can talk about, Travis?
I played an awful lot I can't talk about, and then Jedi Survivor, which I can talk about. I also played. I've been. I'm in between reviews. My next review is still, I think, over a week away before I'll start working on it. And then obviously I've got to do Diablo 4, which I think is the reason. I think that's the reason they're not having me on anything, because I have to be part of the server slam on the 12th and yada yada. But I am catching up on games that I had to skip because of previous reviews. So I beat Escape Academy randomly. I beat Sifu. I think I told you guys that. I beat Sifu finally, awesome. Which is one I didn't get to play. I replayed Inscription.
I've heard great things about that game. I haven't played it.
Such a good game. You should play it. It's a great game. I'm almost done with Pentiment, which I've been working my way through slowly because I didn't get to do that. Resident Evil 4, which came out, and as you know, I liked that game a lot and didn't get to do the thing. And then I did get to play the remake. And then Destiny, I guess, which is my Halo / Hitman.
Yes.
I guess we can just skip that. Yeah, and then I've been writing about stuff about these games I'm playing. So yeah, I've got previews, and I don't think I can talk about any of them. Unfortunately, I don't even think I can say that I don't even think I can say that I'm playing them, which is unfortunate. I think at least one of them hasn't even been announced, which sucks.
One small piece of good news for people weirdos like me was that Remnant 2, which you did the IGN first for, they announced that they're going to have a physical copy of that game. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay.
Sard says Dan played Hitman, Ains played Halo, Travis played stuff under embargo. Next.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. That's
It's a slow week.
Hey,
no, I actually played
you this time though. You also played a game under embargo. So
yes, I have.
Brothers this week.
Yeah, this week. Yeah. No, I played some other things too, though, I can actually talk about. So the embargo for The Invincible. So The Invincible is a narrative sci-fi game based on a novel of the same name that is coming out by a smaller studio. It's coming out later this year. They released a demo. I believe the demo is up on Steam now. You can play it. And it's a short demo. It's even if you take your time with it, you're looking at 20 to 30 minutes. But it kind of sets up the environment and kind of the feel of the game. If you enjoyed Firewatch, it's kind of the best kind of comparison I can make. It's narrative. It's first person, narrative heavy, building towards a story. So don't go into it thinking it's an FPS or anything like that. It's more kind of walking around, finding things, uncovering secrets, and seeing what unfolds. So it's pretty neat. Yeah, so did I. In fact, I don't even chase achievements, as you know, but I 1000 that game because it was easy, honestly. I think I did that. But yeah, it's neat. So the demo's free, of course, if you play it on Steam. I don't know if it's on console. I didn't check. But yeah, I would recommend checking it out if you enjoy that type of game. It's pretty cool. I don't know anything about the novel. Some people reached out and said they like, I believe his name is Stanislaw Lem. An author. He's dead now, but several or more novels through the decades, and this, like I said, is based on one of the same name, The Invincible. So check it out. It's pretty cool. And I'll have more on that game as it gets closer to release. I'm hopefully going to be covering that game. It interests me a lot. So I talked to PR, and depending on whatever, they don't have a release date now, but we'll see later down the line, depending on where it launches in this crazy year of games. So I will keep going. I want to also shout out, I know I mentioned this a couple weeks ago that I had played it a little bit, but I played it prior to getting these other games earlier this week, I was playing a lot of Battlefield 2042.
Oh, yeah.
Which is crazy to say. It feels very weird to say that out loud. But so the weird thing is I was playing it on Series X and it's beautiful now. I mean, it's beautiful. It runs super smooth, except the game kept crashing on me. So it runs great, except for, just halting immediately. So I don't know if that's just a problem I have, because I saw other people saying they played on Series X with no problem. I have no idea. I switched over to PC, playing it there now, no issue with crashing anyway. And it's been great, honestly. It feels mostly like an old Battlefield game again. So you've got your classes, you've got your loadouts, you've got your customization, your squads, and, big... Dan, you okay?
Yep.
You're giving me a look. I would check it out. I would check it out if you like old Battlefield and were disappointed by 2042. I'd give it another look, try it out. It has changed an awful lot since launch, and they've tuned the hell out of it. So a lot of fun on that one, for sure.
It's almost like they needed another year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Crazy how that happens. With many games, it seems, nowadays.
Every game.
All right. Playing anything else? I have been playing Halo, of course, Rocket League. Halo and Rocket League are kind of my two go-tos, regulars now. Both. So good games.
Both
good games.
games.
Rocket League's game. Yeah, there are lots of good games. And I know
I'm the only
we
one
had
who
that conversation before around yeah. Well, I was going to say we had that conversation before around there's so many good games nowadays that are continual with content, right? Like you basically pick your favorite one or two, and that's where you kind of live on a weekly basis when there's not a new release. I think many of us do that now, and there's so many that are out there for people that it's kind of interesting, really, because I do think it's hilarious that even something like Hitman, which, I know I'm not going to bring up whether it's live service or not, because Travis will say it is, Dan will say it isn't.
No, I will say it is.
Okay, good.
It's like the worst example of a live service game.
Yeah, it's minor live service.
Yeah, it's live service light.
Yeah, light service.
Would you argue most live service are light? I mean, how many deliver a lot of content regularly? Come on.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But yeah, I think that's interesting that people have that kind of comfort game they go back to no matter what. But anyway, let's jump over, because I know you guys have been playing Jedi. A lot of conversation around it this week. And
Dan hasn't been playing. He's just been commenting.
Playing.
It's very different. That's most people.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll let you talk about it. Before we do that, want to get to the always generous Marianne Williams, who, as she does nearly every week, has $20 super stickered us on both sides of the house, both the SG and the Hoeg side. As I always say, super, super generous and super, super thankful for that, Marianne. So appreciate you. Genuinely.
I wonder if people call her Mary a lot, because my wife's name is also Marianne, and she is called Mary constantly, and she can't stand it.
My abuelita is called Marianne, and she hates to be called Mary. So it could go either way.
Yeah.
What's your wife like to be called? Her full name, Marianne?
Yeah, Marianne. It's spelled the same way, except hers actually has a space between it. So technically, maybe that's a different way to spell it. I don't know, because hers is together.
Maybe it's just a username. Her name is Trent Whitaker. We have no idea.
That would be something.
Trent Whitaker.
I just pulled that out of nowhere.
I could tell. I could tell. All right. Jedi boys. So I have it. I installed it. And because of other obligations, I have not played it yet. This was one of the most anticipated games of the year. Also coming from Respawn, of course, who didn't miss previously. The narrative around this the narrative around this game, so reviews are strong, very strong. It's in, I think, mid 80s or so meta, which is higher than Fallen Order. But as I think most of us watching will know, the bigger conversation around this game has been launch issues, particularly on the PC version of the side of the house, where several large creators came out, ACG, Skill Up, the big kind of guys who do reviews on these, and said, From a PC perspective, this game is a disaster. Even with top end hardware, it's barely running. They can't even get it at a stable frame rate.
Especially with front end hardware. Front end hardware is what's crashing it a lot of the time. So, yeah. If you have weaker hardware, you have a better, more stable game, which is interesting.
Okay. And then I've talked to, again, this is anecdotal, just going on what the people I know playing it and the people that I see playing it. But like Joe, Luke, regulars here, others, Mo, playing it, saying all kinds of issues. HDR is broken, frame rate's inconsistent. The 60 FPS mode is more like a 35 mode at times. So I haven't played it, not even a minute. So, Dan, I know you kind of, from what I understand, turned it off because of potential issues or issues.
He hasn't played it.
I didn't buy it.
As soon as I started seeing it, he's just commenting like most people online.
No. Okay. I'm just making a decision not to purchase it based on the reaction it is getting from a large percentage of people that I've talked to directly that have been playing it. I've decided to wait until they fix it to give them my money. And that is going to be my stance going forward. Unless it's Spider-Man and Insomniac screws that up again, we're going to have problems. So
we have two bastions left coming this year. Well, one, we know Diablo is incredible. Yeah. We've played quite a lot of it. But there's two games I'm looking at the rest of the year in terms of this conversation, which is Spider-Man from Insomniac and Armored Core 6, which we're going to get to from From. Mm-hmm. If both of those games have issues at launch, I'm throwing my hands up and saying, forget it. We're done as a society. Gaming is over, because those are two developers who I expect greatness from every time in the house. But yeah, so Travis, why don't you talk about it? Because you've been playing it. As Dan said, as we know here, right? We don't try to regurgitate what we hear on Twitter or socials because often that's misguided. But I'm talking about people that, I game with every single day who are playing this game and literally relaying to me that it has severe issues. Now, I will say, Alex, who's reviewing it for us at Season Gaming, he's still going through it. He's on PS5 and HDR is broken. But he said outside of that, he hasn't had hardly any issues. He's really enjoying it himself.
That's pretty much been what I've heard from everyone I know who's played the game, and from myself personally, and Hoeg, who's not here right now, but he also is playing it, I think, on a different platform than me. He's playing it on PS5. I'm playing it on a Series X, and neither of us have had any problems. And so my thinking on this is that it's PC players who understandably got a really bad port, and that's not uncommon that nowadays PC players have been getting bad ports for years, and I think that Jedi Survivor is simply one of those. Somebody asked me, am I in quality mode? I am in performance mode. PC gamers have a right to be mad, 100%. I've seen the PC version get played, and it doesn't work at all. But the console version is fine. It has some issues. None of them have been bad enough to even get close to ruining the experience for me. I had like one or two areas where the frame rate hitching was visible, and most of the time I haven't even noticed. And a lot of the people online who are claiming that console version is quote broken, they're like, oh yeah, then show us you streaming it with the frame rate tracker across the top. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not basing it off of the frame rate tracker, man. I'm basing it off of, do I notice it when I'm playing, right? That's what everybody does. And when you play it, it's really not noticeable enough to ruin your gameplay experience. So it's not perfect at all when it comes to its performance. But I personally think that the benchmark Nazis are at it again. I mean, they're here. The frame rate fascists are in full force. They've shown up and are ready to make it seem like the game is completely broken on every platform. And it's really just their platform. And when I say their platform, I mean the toxic people, PC players. Sorry, I'm calling you out directly, but a lot of you suck. I get it. They have a right to be mad.
I partially play on PC now, so I don't know if I should be.
So do I. I'm a PC player, but whatever. I'm calling them out. I think they have a right to be mad, 100%. But I think the narrative on Twitter that this is as bad as, on every platform, that everybody playing on Xbox and PS5 is like immediately turning it off. I do not think that's true for a second. Maybe there's people who have worse bugs, a bit worse performance issues on consoles, but it's definitely not at the same level it's on PC. PC, for those who don't know, super hard to develop for because everyone has different rig, everyone has different requirements. You basically have to build the game to work on 900 different permutations of, graphics cards and CPUs and yada yada. It's very complicated, and it sounds like they didn't do their proper testing when they built the port. They for sure did not try it on super high-end hardware, which is why people are pissed off, because all the streamers have super high-end hardware and they're like, what the hell, this doesn't run. My guess is they probably built it for like a mid-tier rig running on a 2080, and if you have very specific build in your rig, it probably runs okay. But whatever, it's terrible. The PC version's really bad. Console, not at all. It's fine. It really is. And importantly, a lot of the people who are complaining about Jedi Survivor played Jedi Order on the Xbox One, the Xbox One X, right? The old one,
right?
Which I did, and that game was supposed to run 60 as well in performance mode and did not. It very much performed like Jedi Survivor did, which is that it was regularly below 60 FPS even in performance mode. And then they updated it for the Xbox Series X and it runs at a stable 60 FPS. But if you play Jedi Order on the Xbox One X or the PS4 Pro possibly, you're going to get basically the exact same performance experience you get with Jedi Survivor in terms of frames. So it's
when the hell did an Xbox One or PS4 Pro run anything that wasn't a tiny little indie game at 60 FPS? I never got any kind of performance like that out of any of those things.
The Series
One X, the One X, or the PS4
the One X
Pro.
ran some stuff at 60 FPS.
Yeah,
it wasn't
I can't imagine
like
it would have ran
but
Fallen Order at that.
I mean, it claimed to. It had a performance mode that was
dumb.
it was aiming for 60 FPS. It basically did the exact same thing.
So here's the funny thing, to your point. So there's console people saying they're having issues. But again, on the PC, so Asante's in our chat. He said, I'm on a 4090 13th gen machine. He just built a new PC, like brand new. And he said it runs quite well, 90% well. Then in Hoeg's chat, Christopher said Cyberpunk ran 120 FPS on my PC. This is max 70 FPS on a 4090. So it's like the disparity between what you hear from one person to the next about how this game runs is wild to me. It's just like,
it might be specific configurations too. I have no idea if it's like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the PC situation. I see somebody saying in the comments that it's not hard. Okay, it is hard. It is hard. I assure you, it's hard. It's hard to develop your game and try to think of all the possible configurations in terms of, if you don't know the memory you're targeting, the CPU that you're working with, all that stuff. It is hard to account for that. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, by the way. I'm saying it's hard and they should have done the work. They should have delayed the PC port. They should have just said, hey, PC players, you're getting the game a year later, like Rockstar does when they release Grand Theft Auto, right? Like they could have easily done that. And I think they probably would have saved face, because I think without the PC disaster, console players would probably largely be loving this game. And I am seeing a lot of love for it, by the way. People who are just completely oblivious to the PC situation, just like posting their W's on console and being like, oh my God, this is the best game ever.
A lot of people love the game. Yeah, no doubt.
A lot of people love the game. Probably not any PC players, because I haven't seen it run on any PC players' rigs. For the people wondering about why the reviews are high, because I have seen a lot of like people going, oh, paid shills, the reviews were phoned in, blah, blah, blah.
So I want to get to that.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. Okay,
cool. We'll get to that later. Then.
By the way, I was laughing a moment ago, not at what you were saying, Travis, but at Agnes in the chat, who said cries in Switch player. Yeah. Which is, that's a whole.
Here's the thing: when you're a Switch player, when you're a Switch player, you know exactly what you're getting. If you spent $4,000 on a gaming PC and it can't run this game as well as it runs Jedi Survivor, that feels terrible. But if you're a PC player, you probably know that this isn't new. Like, I've been a PC player for years, and like PC ports have sucked for decades. This is not a new phenomenon.
They're very hit or miss. And there's been a lot of examples this year where PC launches have been bad. We don't have to bring up The Last of Us, which, a few weeks ago was a disaster. Dead Space had issues. There's been a bunch of bad PC releases recently. So it's interesting. I will say, now that I have a high-end PC, new PC, and obviously PS5 Series X, it's nice being able to just look around and be like, all right, where do I feel like playing this? And just pick wherever, is best.
You pick but that's not reasonable for most players. And I
agree.
Yeah, if you own a console, you're feeling pretty good about your decision right now, and then you're playing. I think we just talked about a game a couple weeks ago that did the opposite. It was basically only playable on PC, and that console version was really bad. And so,
feels like we're going to have that conversation again soon.
If you're a console player, part of what you pay for is what? Oh God, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. If you're I forgot already. If you're a console player, part of what you pay for is the console owners protecting you from bad games getting released. And so you have a real reason to be pissed when a game is sold to you on those platforms that doesn't work well, because that's supposed to be caught by their QA team. There's a certification process. PC largely doesn't have that. And so when you buy a game on PC, you kind of have to either do your own research or talk to somebody or look at user reviews or do something like that, because who knows how it runs, and there's nobody to protect you because it's a laissez-faire, situation over there. But yeah, I feel for PC players. I think that the console hate is overblown, and it's a lot of people on PC passing judgment on the console version for not running a steady 60. I don't know if there were very many people who own a Series X or PS5 who were expecting a stable 60 FPS on this game. That is not the history of this franchise on console. It has not done that historically. And it's also, importantly, Jedi Survivor is not really the type of game that needs 60 FPS. There's a reason it cannot hit the 60 FPS.
Are you starting with this again?
God.
I mean, it's true. It's just true. It's not a Twitch shooter. You know what I mean? Like it's a
precision parrying combat, like
with the window
Ring.
that's like 19 minutes. It's a 19-minute parry window. It's my first Souls-like. It requires very little skill. It's a very simple game.
Excuse.
Keep going, Dan. I've been waiting to click this button.
I mean, come on now.
Nice.
And then you say that there's console players that weren't really
Dan,
expecting it
let me ask you a follow-up question before you continue. Can I ask a follow-up question before you continue? Have you played the game?
No, I'm not saying.
Shut up!
No, this is not about Jedi Survivor, right? This is about the general crap that we've been getting for the past year. Why? I want a steady 60 FPS. What the hell is going on here?
The funny thing is, I completely agree with Dan in the concept of what he's saying, because we've had this conversation many times around. We should be able to expect 60 frames per second. On the flip side, I also am with Travis, where there's way too much conversation from people generally on games they haven't played. And that can get very frustrating. Man, you caught me off guard.
It's a larger conversation about the state of game releases that we've had in the past few months. That's what I'm talking about. Not this game specifically.
I think that's a fair conversation. That is, by the way, I'm not invalidating that. I'm not invalidating that at all. I think the next step of this conversation is we're going to talk about instability in game releases, and I'm your ally on that. 100% your ally on that, because games have been releasing in a completely not okay state for a while. Right. My problem with the Jedi Survivor is I really do think it's frame rate fascists going, if you don't get to 60 FPS, you're not worth playing. And that's just simply not true, especially for certain types of games. And I would say over-the-shoulder, third-person adventure games like Jedi Survivor is a great example of a game that doesn't need to be 60 FPS to be enjoyed. And look no further than the people who've played the game and are saying that. All the reviewers, right, which we're going to talk about. Sure. Ayn said that's coming up next, right? The people reviewing the game are playing it. That's, it doesn't run a stable 60 FPS. Neither did Jedi Order. You played that game and you didn't run it at 60 FPS, Dan, and you liked it.
Right, because I had a piece of crap console that
you do
couldn't
now.
do it.
The console you own now is a piece of crap. It's $500.
Yes, but now it can run the previous game at
my
60
GPU
FPS.
costs 3 times what your console costs.
I don't
care
about your GPU. I care about
I'm telling you, your console, you can't buy a $500 console and expect it to run every game at 60 FPS. It's just not going to.
Not saying that they literally that's fine. If they hadn't put a performance mode in, then your argument would be valid. However, they did. Like if you just want they should have just made it one mode. Why even put in the option to have a performance mode then? I don't understand that.
Because the performance mode runs at a higher frame rate than the quality version.
Yeah, what, 32? I mean,
the performance version on mine is like probably sometimes it's hit 60, very rarely, and it goes between 52 and 60. It bounces around, and sometimes it's really bad, like it actually hitches and you have like lost frames, and then it jumps back up. But it's sort of like stuff you're used to when you play a game and you're like, all right, yeah, there's a lot of load right now, and then it passes. A couple seconds later, it passes. And I've only really had it happen like 2 or 3 times. I had it once when I first got to one of the new planets, and then once on Coruscant Durf Fight, it like hitched for a second. And I went, uh-oh. But, by and large, it's not an experience ruining situation.
The funny thing is, so literally one comment apart in our chat, Luke said, I love Jedi, and he's a diehard Star Wars guy. I love Jedi, but I've lost at least 4 hours of progress due to collective crashes. And he's on Xbox, I believe. And then Sarko, like,
I've not had that, yeah.
One comment later says Jedi Survivor has been an awesome ride this far. That's what I mean. It just seems all over the place.
All over the place. That's why I haven't bought it. There is no consensus on how this game runs. It's either it's awesome or it's trash. And so I don't
think anybody's saying it's awesome. The performance is not awesome. The performance is,
from a story perspective.
The performance is passable in what I expected on console based on what we know about how powerful these consoles are and how big Jedi Survivor is. What's that?
So then your expectations are too low.
No, I just have realistic expectations of what is in the console. I know what's in the console. I know how powerful the consoles are.
Yeah.
So here's
the dumb babies like us over here, sitting right here, did not understand that. We thought that the most powerful console in the world would be able to do certain things. The people that are not console savvy or tech savvy.
The most powerful console in the world is like saying the smartest redneck in the world. You know what I mean? Like it's not a high bar to clear.
We saw kind of this jump in performance, right? Like it's like right out the bat with like games like Valhalla and then like Legion, and we thought it was like, oh, look what this thing can do. This is awesome. And then all of a sudden it's bottleneck. You start talking about crap that I don't understand. All I know is that my game looks like crap all of a sudden.
I think to be fair, I think again, you both have valid points,
right?
But I think Dan, right? Take it from the perspective of you've paid $500 for a console, which you were told, right? And I know you agree with this, Travis, right? You were told from marketing that this is going to provide next-gen experiences and higher frame rates and higher graphical fidelity.
Which it does, by the way.
It does. But, it has led to expectations, to your point, that are probably too high. But I wouldn't say it's the fault of the consumer, right? The consumer is listening to what they're told and doesn't expect these types of issues at launch. They just don't.
Well, it's a little bit the fault of the consumer because the consumer is getting the stuff that, look, the console is the most powerful console in the world. The Series X, it is, from what I can tell, the most powerful console in the world. It does run games at higher frame rate. Many games on the console are at 60 FPS locked.
Well, it runs a bunch of games in 120 as well.
It runs a lot of games in 4K. Almost all of them in 4K.
It runs a lot of games in 4K. Maybe not 4K textures. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. It does a lot of that stuff. But I think the expectation that as the life cycle of the console goes on, and we're now, multiple years into these consoles, and certain games like Starfield, does anybody think Starfield is going to run at 60 FPS on the Series X?
No.
Why is it okay to have that? Why is it okay to have that expectation, right? Like there's certain games we know aren't going to run at those frame rates. And I think anybody who thought that's a little bit a fault of the consumer. If there's anybody out there who is expecting
because they
Starfield
told us it would run at 60 frames.
Did they tell you that Starfield would run at 60 frames?
No,
Dan?
but they told us Jedi Survivor would because there was a frame performance. Well, stop opening your damn mouth, developers, and just shut the hell up and release whatever you're going to release, and we'll just see what happens. They're setting the expectations with what they're telling us before it comes out. I literally saw a sticker on a Redfall hard copy that said 60 FPS, and then there was a sticker that said this does not release at 60 FPS at launch. That's where we're at. All right.
Yeah.
For God's sake, stop it. Stop not holding these people accountable. Hold their feet over the fire and stop making goddamn excuses for these guys. That just blows my mind. And that's all we do. And it's not just the Xbox, it's the PS5 too. And I'm not even blaming the developers. It may be the people up here that like, we need to release this because we need to hit this quarter and we need to hit this money right now. The developers work so hard on this stuff. And in this kind of conversation, it really minimizes what they've done. All right. Because I'm sure Jedi Survivor is an amazing game, and they just didn't have the time. And that's what really ticks me off. It's mostly these publishers that have to have their freaking quarterlies or whatever the hell they are. I don't understand that crap either. I just want a game that comes out that runs like it says it was going to run. And if that's asking too much, then maybe I shouldn't be a gamer. Maybe I should go somewhere else. I know what I'm going to get.
So I agree with everything you said just now, by the way. I agree with everything you said just now. I was referring specifically to specific examples, or I was referring to non-specific examples, the idea that every game is going to run 60 FPS, which I think is both an unrealistic expectation, one, B, not what they said when they sold the console. They said the standard will be 60 FPS, right? And among other things, I think there are some things that are the player's fault, but you're 100% right that in the specific examples you mentioned where they said that one thing was going to happen and then they didn't, that's bullshit.
And that's what I'm talking 100%. About. It's not 100%. We know that, Starfield, there's no way. If they do it, they're magical. Like if
they do it, they could just render it in 480p. That would be 60 FPS.
And I don't know anything about development, but I think that they, I don't blame them for this stuff. I don't blame them for when games release in this kind of state because it's not their decision. They work, maybe some of the upper level guys, but but they work their butts off, and they do as best as they can, and they do with what time constraints they have. So I'm not mad at them. It's stupid to be mad at those people. It's that just shouldn't be released. Games like this, everybody's expecting, like you said, Travis, Starfield's going to be at 30. If it's not, I'll be shocked, right? But it's also doing, like to your point of a lot of things, it's doing a lot more maybe in the background. I don't know anything about it. There's
but that's a realistic expectation, Dan.
And that's a realistic expectation.
A lot of the frame rate fascists say your game cannot not hit 60, and even if you have to cut the game in half, right, half the baby to make it happen, it has to hit 60, and that's what I push against in these sorts of things. I also push against the idea that Jedi Survivor is broken on console. It's just not. There's way too many people playing it, and it runs almost identically in terms of frames to Jedi Order. It's a enjoyable experience for those games. I have no problem with everything else that you're saying, and I think that on PC it 100% should have been delayed. That's not a state you can release a game in. But I think Jedi Survivor, it'll get patches, it'll probably be better. But right now on console, there's a lot of people enjoying it, and I think that they should have just held off on the PC version. That's it. The PC version's unacceptable.
Yeah, our reviewer actually stopped in, Alex. Shout out to Alex, saying, coming here to say, yes, Jedi Survivor has performance issues in the big worlds. It stabilizes in small areas, and the performance overall doesn't ruin what is an amazing game.
And that is pretty much what everybody's saying who's actually played the game on console. And by the way, so are we getting to the review part yet? I keep almost going there.
Yes, because I wanna get your thoughts on something, and Dan can obviously offer his thoughts as well. Before we do that, shout out to our regular Brentwood Chic. I didn't get to shout it out because we were in versus mode and Travis was breaking microphones again. But gifting memberships over at the channels, as always, very generous. Thank you very much for that. It really does, especially on the SG side. It really helps us out in terms of support. So thank you very much. So Travis, before we get to the broken game conversation, I want to talk about the reviews of this game, right? So reviews came out. It got a lot of 9s. IGN gave it a 9. And there's, good scores across.
Give it a 9.
Your boss gave it a 9. Good scores across the board. And then there's others who, again, some of the bigger content creators, I don't know if any major sites, I'd have to look, but said we're just going to wait to review this because of performance. So I want to get your thoughts on this, because I've kind of gone back and forth on this, and I've said that, yeah, these need to be called out, and I think whether or not it affects your score is one thing. So I'm going to read real quick and I'm not pointing at IGN specifically, just the larger conversation of, does performance, or should performance, depending on how bad it is, or issues, affect review score?
Yes.
So, okay,
yes,
okay.
100%.
And I agree with you. I agree with you holistically, anyway, or on large. But phrases are all over the place. But here is what Dan, I guess, wrote, and not Dan. For those watching, not our Dan. Dan Stapleton over to IGN. He said, throughout it all, Survivor is a gorgeous game with beautifully detailed environments and characters, and perhaps as a result, not one of the best performing. My PS5 playthrough, so he's on console, saw some fairly gnarly slowdowns from the expected 30 frames per second in 4K quality mode, especially when fighting around smoke or fog, which made timing by parries or dodges difficult. Disappointingly, even the 1440p performance mode isn't close to holding a lock 60. I also saw a few crashes and bugs that forced me to quit and reload my save. EA has naturally promised more patches will come with improvements on all platforms, but if history is any guide, it might take a little while before it's completely ironed out.
Yep.
So he kind of touches on the things we're talking about and that we've heard from the people having issues, right? And he gave it a 9. And obviously, I'm not putting you on the spot to criticize your boss or IGN.
No, but I want you to do that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no problem with that.
But we heard this from a lot of people who reviewed it, right? And you get those day one reviews out. There's a reason we have day one reviews. We all know what they are. We've talked about that many times. But if this is me, right? And I got this question when I reviewed Cyberpunk at launch. My experience of Cyberpunk on Series X was generally fine. I got a few bugs, some T-poses here and there, stuff like that, but nothing that really broke my experience, right? I had one crash. And I've talked about this before. Nothing that really damaged my playthrough. He's talking about a lot of slowdown, a lot of frame rate issues. He mentioned several crashes, bugs to quit and reload, and yet still giving the game a 9. So my question is, what are your thoughts around that, right? Like, if you are a reviewer, you and I have talked about, you can only speak to what you experience, right? You can't go off of anyone else but what you experience. If I'm playing a game for review, and it has issues so severe that it's crashing, I'm having to reload. This happened with me with Returnal. Returnal, I lost hours of progress reviewing that game. And I called that out and, docked it a bit in the review for it. But I made sure to point out that, hey, if this gets fixed up, these issues will be resolved. But this game got 9 and 9.5 from some places. In fact, I think VGC, not that I should call them out because gave it a 10. Despite talking about issues. That seems off to me, personally.
So, a couple things, because you're talking on a lot of issues that reviewers have to think about. Because one is can you give a game a 10, a perfect score, even when it's not a perfect game? And I would say yes. And can a game have lots of problems? Yes.
10 doesn't mean perfect, as you and I have agreed.
10 doesn't mean perfect. A game could still be a masterpiece and have performance issues 100%. Also, it's worth noting yet again that scoring and how you feel about a game is 100% subjective, and so yes, it could mean anything depending on the person. It's really just about credibility and how much do you trust that person's opinion. And Dan Stapleton is somebody I trust. He's my boss. He taught me a lot about how to review games and what it means to be a reviewer, so obviously he's somebody I look up to. The comments that Dan made, I think there's a couple things happening here. One, people online were assuming that because EA promised in the patch notes that anytime we encountered a bug, any reviewer encountered a bug, they just go to, oh, well, that's in the patch notes, so I'm just not going to count it, right? So I'm just not going to count. I'm not going to think about it. That's not what happens. At least at IGN, it's not what happens. What happens is when you review a game, they give you a review guide, and part of the review guide includes a large list of bugs that they know are in the game that they claim that they have already fixed or that is going to be fixed before players play it. And that's called like what's included in the day one patch, or bugs you'll see, yada yada. If there's a specific example of like, hey, this specific thing happens at this part and that will be patched out, those are pretty easy to ignore, right? And I think those probably should be ignored. Good example. If there's a cutscene where one character, the subtitles are different from what he's saying, right? And they mention that specifically in the patch notes. That's like, and it says, hey, during this cutscene, his subtitles are wrong. That's like a pretty easy example of, okay, that's a very specific problem that's in one cutscene, one line of dialogue that has different subtitles. They're going to fix that. But if they say stuff like, and a lot of them do, oh, there will be performance improvements throughout. That's bullshit. Crashing will be addressed, stuff like that. Like that's like stuff where maybe it's true, but as a reviewer, you do not take them at their word. You go, look, it happened to me. I'm writing about it. Like that's it. And people who give you review codes understand that that's going to happen. And usually they give it to you understanding, okay, well, the issues aren't that big of a deal. If they happen to a player in real life, then we would be okay with it. And we're just going to put it out there because we want our game to be out. So there's that. So that is not happening. We're not going, okay, the day one patch says this is fixed, so we're just going to give them a pass. Nobody's doing that. IGN's not doing that. Okay. The other thing is the paragraph that Dan included on performance, I think is a responsible one. He's telling the truth. It doesn't maintain 30 FPS in quality mode. It doesn't maintain 60 FPS in performance mode. The question is, how much does that impact your enjoyment of the game? And I can only speak for myself and what I got from Dan's review, which is that it does not run a stable frame rate on either of those. It doesn't run at the promised frame rate. I would say the frame rate's pretty stable on mine. It's just not a stable 60. It's like a stable like 55, 52, depending on which area I'm in. The question is, does that impact your enjoyment of the game? And which again is a 100% subjective question. I can only speak for myself, which is for me, it does not. It's disappointing when the frame rate hitches completely and you're like, okay, that was a weird moment where things kind of got out of a line, but that doesn't happen very often, at least in my experience. And obviously in Dan's review, since he gave it a 9 as well, it also didn't affect him that much. There are some people out there, the frame rate fascists, who, if the game doesn't run 60, they are incapable of enjoying it according to them. If you're one of those people, you're living on a completely different review scale than I could attest to, because that's just not the frame I see the world from. But if you're like that, then yeah, you like find somebody who believes that as well and is writing reviews that way. I'm not that guy, and I think Dan probably isn't either. Interestingly, Dan is more probably concerned with frame rates and stuff like that. So the fact that he still gave it a 9 should tell you a lot. But to answer your question, Ains, yes, a game can not meet its performance standards that it tries to meet and still be fun. Yes, it can you can still crash a bunch of times and still be like, okay, well, I crashed, but when I will go back and I think about me playing the game, do I think about the 3 times that it crashed and I had to reset it? Or do I think about the 40 hours that I played it and it was totally fine? And if that's how you experience the game, you can 100% give it a 9. And I think that's what happened. So it's not anybody being dishonest. It's just people giving their honest opinions and people disagreeing with it. And the people who disagree with those opinions strongly perceive those differing opinions as insincerity or dishonesty. But that's not what's happening. It's just honestly held beliefs and people telling you what they felt when they played the game. And I do think that the majority of the people who are saying, I don't believe you, you're lying, blah, 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 either have not played the game or played it on PC. And the last thing I want to talk about,
or just generally don't have common sense or coming from a bias,
or don't have common sense. There's some of that, but I'm trying to be charitable to some of these people at least. There's also the question of review platform. This comes up a lot, and it's actually super important to the review process, which is when the reviewer gives you a chance to review the game, it's a little telling in how cooked the game is based on which platforms they offer you. In this case, my understanding is Jedi Survivor, you were told which platform you were playing on, and it was not PC. Therefore, they knew there was problems with the PC version, or they were at least more kind of less confident about it, because
they had more faith in the console version.
They had more faith in the console version, because I personally don't know anybody who reviewed the game on PC, and it was not a choice that we were given. And so the best we can do is we can tell you what the game felt like on the platform we play on, and we specifically highlight this was reviewed on PS5, right? So we're only attesting to the quality of the PS5 at this point in time. And then, later we can play it on other platforms and we can update the review. Or sometimes what we've done is we've done separate reviews for separate platforms if they diverge enough. We did 2 different reviews for Cyberpunk 2077. A lot of people forget that. We did a PC version, and then we did an Xbox One version, and it was a 9 versus a 4, right? Like those were that was the divergence there. And so I think that's important too, is a lot of people don't know that a lot of the reviews happened on console, and console is a very different state for the game. And so a lot of these reviews, including IGN's, were on PS5, where the game is not anything resembling what it's like on PC.
So wait, is that worth mentioning in the review then? I mean, like
we do mention it.
Not just saying I played this on a PS5. That's saying one thing. You see that a lot in reviews. Is it worth noting like that? Okay, well, we were sent, or that it sounds like everybody got console versions of the review code, or I don't know how you can tell that generally, but that's all they send throughout.
That's the problem, Dan, is that we don't have a good idea of why or if that happened until the reviews are already out, because sometimes it's just a like, oh, we're on PC, but our PlayStation version, it's a marketing deal, right? And so we have to have all the review copies be on PS5, or that's where we got through our certification process first, right? It was on the PlayStation, or
like Hogwarts was PS5 for review because
of marketing. Yeah. Sometimes it's because the publishers actually have to pay money for the review codes. So they get sold the review codes at a discounted price, all the codes that they distribute, but they actually have to pay for them after a certain number. They get a certain number for free, and then after that they pay. I think they get like 100 for free most cases. And then every other copy they give out to streamers or outlets, they actually have to pay for. And so sometimes it's like, which platform is it cheapest to acquire a key on? And so I guess the point is, it's so hard to tell why a platform is being given on a certain, or why a review code is being given on a certain platform, or what the deal is. We have no idea during the review process. And so we have to wait until after it comes out. And then if we see trends like, oh, they didn't offer us a PC copy, and when we asked, they said, I don't have any codes yet. And then we noticed online that now the reviews are out and nobody has a PC one. They probably avoided it because the game was buggy. So there's just no way to like call it out before the review. But I do get that is a real concern. I would just say, if you're a consumer of reviews, pay attention to what platforms it's being reviewed on. Sometimes that means something. In this case, it probably did, because I think there were Xbox and PlayStation and not a lot of PC reviews out there.
It was almost, if you look at where they were reviewed from, like the Metacritic, OpenCritic, it was like 90% PS5.
There you go. So sometimes there's a reason for it. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's just an innocent coincidence, or marketing deal like Hogwarts, because Hogwarts.
Or they ask you. I've had a few games recently where the publisher has asked me, what do I want to play it on?
When they ask that gives me a lot more confidence in the game, because I'm like, oh, they're down for any platform. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so. And I, at that point, I try to figure out where it may best run. But I generally agree with you, Travis, and you and I have talked extensively about this. One, you can only speak to the experience you personally have, right? You shouldn't speak to anyone else, any chatter. The other thing, you should call out issues, of course, if the issues impact your enjoyment of the game, or in a significant way where it's causing you trouble reviewing the game. That's got to factor in. It has to. But as I said, and it sounds like you tried to explain for Dan Stapleton, that is, and others, if there's some slowdown here and there, maybe a crash or two, but you start the game and you're right back where you were without lost progress, that's a different issue than game constantly crashing, losing progress, broken things. There's things that I've reviewed in games before where just like objective markers are broken, you can't continue a quest, right? That's a whole nother issue. So Yeah. There's a lot of, you and I always talk about, there's a lot of context and nuance to these conversations. And sadly, the arguments that happen across social media don't leave room for context or nuance. They automatically race to someone was paid off, someone, they're biased against a certain platform. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for a while now as an independent outlet. I talk to a lot of people, not just Travis, of course, at the biggest outlet in the world, but I talk to a lot of people at other outlets, and there's probably some of that out there, right? But generally speaking, on the whole, that stuff just doesn't happen, guys. It just doesn't. People are generally, I should say, trying to do the best they can with what they're given. So,
yeah, it's a lot of people honestly trying to navigate the situation, and I think a lack of trust between people and media in general, which I would argue is somewhat warranted, but largely unwarranted. Personally, that's just the way I look at the situation. Is causes everybody to look at each other as a bad actor, when honestly it's just people trying their best, especially in the games industry. That's just been my experience. People trying their best.
Yeah, and when Travis spoke about those. When you get those review codes, you get a gigantic, and it's a lot of information. I remember the first one I saw was when we got Valhalla, and I was like, dang, man, there is a lot more, that goes into this than people I think realize. I didn't. And it's
You're talking about a review guide that you got.
Yeah, like the Hugh review guide with pages and pages of stuff, like this is known issues. These are,
some of the review guides are giant,
huge.
Yeah. It's like reading
really
material.
big, and it's a lot to kind of go through, and then you have to kind of cater your review a little bit based on some of the stuff that's in there. I mean, just because there's guidelines and stuff like that where it's like embargo dates, obviously, but
also stuff they don't want you to spoil is what Dan's talking about. He's not saying like, oh, you can't talk about this.
Right.
Usually what they're telling you is like, hey, don't show any cutscenes where this happens because of spoilers. And so they try to, don't show the grapple hook because we want that to be a surprise for players in the third act. Stuff like that where they're trying to just like protect the player. They're not trying to do.
I have that right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There's certain things called out for that reason. So. With all this conversation around Jedi and stuff, me and Dan haven't played it. Travis, how far are you? Let's keep it. We've talked about the issues. We've talked about the reviews. How far into the game are you, and are you enjoying it as a Star Wars fanatic?
I'm a couple planets into the game, so I think players will know how long that is. I'm really enjoying it as a Star Wars game and a Star Wars fanatic. It's a fantastic Star Wars game. The characters you meet and the kind of town you're putting together on one of the planets. Ains, you'll be happy to know that one of the goofiest characters is voice acted by our boy who plays Rasputin in Psychonauts. And
yes,
he's perfect for Star Wars, by the way. He's got like the perfect voice to play an alien in Star Wars.
Fantastic. It's already up a half point for me. So.
Yeah, honestly, I as soon as I heard that voice, I was like, where do I recognize that voice? Oh my God, that's Rasputin. it's so good. I'm really enjoying it so far. And it really is disappointing that so much of the PC discussion and just talk about performance in general is weighing down what I think is one of the better games I've played this year. I'm not all the way through it. I do have problems with it, by the way, as much as I'm not like mad at its performance on consoles as much as other people. It's still very easy Souls-like gameplay, which even on the hardest difficulty, it's kind of like, even on the hardest difficulty, it's like, okay, well, it's not like a incredibly challenging game, but by and large, like the way it expands its side quests, making builds is now more of a thing. All the different lightsaber stances that were added and stuff like that. It surprises me when it adds stuff, and I'm like, oh, that should have been in the first one. Also, the map isn't that improved. That really bothers me too. It's kind of improved, but it's not that improved. And I'm like, oh,
you had one job, Reese. One.
Yeah, I know. I feel like they should have got that feedback pretty good. So I definitely have issues with it. I don't know where I haven't finished the game, so I can't finalize my review, but I definitely can see where Dan's coming from with the 9. I don't know if I would be that high. I haven't finished it, but my God, it is great story. great world. Fighting through the areas and just being in a Star Wars Souls-like is amazing. The mobility is way better than it was in the first game. They really upped their game in terms of just like movement. Another thing I really love about the game, it doesn't do that awkward thing where you lose all your powers and then have to regain them back, and so you don't have double jump or wall run for the beginning. It gives you access to all the stuff you had in the first game right away, and then you start unlocking new stuff early on. And I'm like, yes, it's like, it's just additive. It's not like, oh, you know,
No
you
games
know,
ever do that.
your Samus suit exploded, and now you have, you know, you have to go grab your super bomb again. It's like, no, it doesn't do that at all. It's like, nope, you got all your force powers, and now you're just adding new stuff onto it and becoming even stronger, which is really cool. And I'm really excited to see where the story goes, because I hear that the ending is like, I hear it's a very backloaded game. Like, I hear the ending is going to be like crazy. So
Alex just posted, he said there's a moment halfway through the game that will be talked about as one of the most exciting moments of any game this year. I was in awe.
Yep, I've got past that point. It's so damn good. Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are pre-blowing my mind. Let's slow down here a little
so
bit.
Dan, I honestly, like, I know that you're a frame rate fascist in some regards, but I honestly
I love the
think
frame rate fascist word, by the way. I love it.
Thank you.
Sure.
But I honestly think if you played the Series X version, you probably wouldn't notice, except for the parts where it like straight up hitches, you wouldn't notice the frame rate not meeting 60 most of the time, since it gets close-ish.
See, I want to play it on the PS5 because of the DualSense features, though. That's
then do that. I mean, it runs.
I think that's where I think. Yeah, I was gonna say I've
it probably runs best on PS5. Yeah.
Mr. Babbitt, I actually messaged him last night on PSN. I was like, "How is that performance rate?" He's like, "It's pretty rough." You know, he said, but the quality mode it runs pretty well. You know, I mean, there's really no big issues and stuff like that. It's just, man, it's just the whole thing is just this whole trend really that we're doing here, and these kind of half finished games, or like fully finished but like not fully optimized games, right? I guess.
Is this our transition, Ains? Are we going to the next topic? Because I think that's where Dan's.
Yeah, we can. Let me just get the two super chats that have been sitting for a while.
Let's do that real quick.
Yeah, we've got just two that I want to get to.
Sure. Nine Inch Nails, gal.
Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, if Hoeg comes on after I fall asleep, I'm going to cry in the morning. Love to Hoeg, Mrs. Hoeg, and the Hoeglings. Thanks, Bitcast, for helping each week.
Of course. Thank you. Love to Australia. Yeah, you guys are in a different world over there. I think it's 17 hours ahead from where we're at, so it's like whatever that is, 9 p.m. on Monday, right?
Why can't we have kangaroos?
Or they're over now.
I feel like we could support it, you know.
Because I talked to Elliot, who does the video editing at Season Gaming, is in Australia, and when we're talking about editing and so we're always like all over the place on our times. It's a mess. But thank you very much. And then Don's in the house.
Hope we get a Hoeg appearance today with this topic.
Yeah, it still might happen.
Have thoughts about Star Wars though, and we've talked about it offline, and he's kind of on my side. He's been playing the game, and he hasn't really been that impacted by the performance issues, and he's just loving it. So that's a little preview on what Hoeg will probably say, unless his opinions have changed. Maybe he put on the armband in between that conversation.
Oh, that's a good shout. Yeah, he did. He said he was really enjoying it. As I said, he may swing by here. We're not sure. So just wish him the best. You know, stuff going on. But Don, thank you, brother. Good to have you. And Shoosh is back.
Yeah, with the €5. How easy, or is that pound? No, that's euros. Is that euros?
That's euros.
Yeah. How easily defeat droids in Jedi Survivor PC? Force pull the ram sticks out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need that sound effect in our sounds. But
those droids do remind me of PC players. They talk all the time. They're bots. It's great.
Gosh dang it.
I would like to point out, I have a new, very expensive PC, and you don't hear me rambling about it. Like playing games, I don't feel superior in any way. Just play your games and shut up.
I also have a new 4090 Ryzen 9 PC, and you do hear me talking about it. I think I'm better than everyone.
I am now better than everyone.
I hate you all. I spit on your graves, and also I run Jedi Survivor at 12 FPS.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, I think I guess the topic, and we talked a little bit in DMs about this, and it really just kind of continues what we were just talking about, which is this is not uncommon now, right? So we see games getting delayed constantly, and even after delays, they release unoptimized. Not necessarily what I would call unfinished. It depends on what your definition of finished is, right? We had the arguments with Halo. Is it a complete game? And Travis and I took that to bat. But I think that unoptimized is probably the fairer word here, or the more fair word. And it sounds like that's what we're seeing out of Jedi. It's what we saw out of Dead Space. It's what we saw out of Callisto. It's what, I mean, the list goes on. There's been an awful lot of unoptimized games. In fact, I just want to shout out Capcom, because Capcom's games have been killing it at launch for a while now. And Resident Evil 4, amazing at launch as well. I actually joked on Twitter, which blew up, and people took me way too seriously.
Somebody commented that one was
Last of Us on PC disaster. But I joked on Twitter that who saw at the start of 2023, who is the betting man that said that Dead Island 2 would be the best optimized game at launch?
It's on my Twitter. You didn't see that tweet? Let me go edit the tweet real quick.
But generally speaking, we see this a lot now. And obviously, as we grew up, most of us are older here, not Travis. But we grew up in an era where that just didn't happen, because you didn't have patches that could be pushed out. The game had to release ready, right?
Yeah.
So what is it? I know, Travis, you've talked to some developers about this. I have talked to a few developers about this, and the consensus I seem to get is that generally people, and I mean the vast majority of people, especially on social media, don't understand the differences that are required for game development today, which include, as you said, permutations across all kinds of different hardware, because PC is obviously a big percentage, the biggest single percentage of gaming in the space now, right? And those permutations themselves are massive. Then you have cross-gen stuff, right? So you've got PS4, PS5, you got Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, right? And then once you take all the hardware variances out of it, what they've told me is the connectivity and the cross kind of development, to get things to work across servers, cross play to work, cross save to work, all these different features that are generally required out of AAA games nowadays, working on different launchers, working on different, lobby systems, all of these things kind of culminate into basically a disaster in trying to get these things to work coherently and effectively. And they've told me directly that just with the way engines are and the code is, and how one line of code that you may fix something can break 20 other things down the line, they've essentially told me that it just takes an extremely long time to fix things effectively, test it properly, QA it, get it out the door to where it's a good end user experience. So I don't think it's one factor that anyone can point to. I don't think it's that it's just there's hardware differences. I don't think it's just that there's a lot of online connectivity. I think, or that there's different engines, or that, different changes that happen over the course of development, right? And development cycles are longer now, so those changes are broader. I think it's just all of these things culminating in a very difficult environment for development. That's what I understand anyway. And I've said many times, I'm not in game development, but I am in application development. And it's similar to a degree in the sense of the larger your scope, the larger the kind of variances and the things you're trying to create, and the more you have to do it across different systems, platforms, testing, etc., the more issues you run into and the longer it takes. And I think that that's generally what we're seeing. And when you combine that with an industry that's growing, with an industry that has more players than ever, that's more vocal than ever, that has more insight into game development and early access than ever, it's just sometimes a recipe for disaster. Not always. Early access and early previews and kind of consumer feedback can help in sometimes, and there's instances of that. But generally speaking, it's a much different environment than it was even 10 years ago, never mind 20 and 30 years ago. And developers that I've talked to, the few, have told me very clearly that it can be a mess. So I'll stop because I've rambled for a few minutes, but that's generally my feedback I've gotten on it.
Yeah, I think all of those reasons are some of the few, and there are
Right,
a
there's
lot
more.
of reasons.
Sure.
There's like even more than that list. But yeah, the one I hear a lot is just like the bloat of games nowadays. Nowadays games are so much bigger than they were, and people point at like 20 years ago and go, oh yeah, no games came out broken back then because they had to be complete, and that is certainly true. But also games were much smaller in their scope than they are now.
Yeah.
They were completely different games, and they required much smaller teams, and the barrier of expectation was much lower. You didn't hear anybody talking about 60 FPS back then, and all those other things. So there's that. And then the idea that, well, just delay the game then. If the game's not ready, delay it. Sure, but there's a real battle between creatives and the practical people at businesses about bloat versus putting the game out in some form that is acceptable. If you give creatives time to make the game that they've always wanted to make, they will certainly take you up on that offer. The problem is they will never say that they're done. And that is just true of like creative types. They'll just keep adding stuff, and they'll keep perfecting and tweaking and modifying. The game will never come out. And so you kind of need people in the room to be like, all right, we have to decide on the scope. We have to decide on how long it's going to take you to do this. And we have to get a release date at some point, because money doesn't grow on trees. You have to put out a product at a certain point. And so I think that battle is actually healthy. A lot of people pointed it as like, the thing that's wrong with the industry. I don't think that's true. I think what's wrong is, people putting out a product that they know doesn't work. But I do think that it's important for games to have a release date and for a scope to be decided, and for them to try to hit it at any cost.
Isn't that two different things though? I mean, like if you set us, regardless of whether they're creatives or whatever you call them, it's this is where we need to be, right? You set that scope at the beginning, and both sides, not only the publishers and the creatives need to come together and say, this is where we're going to be at, regardless of the amount of time it takes, but if you settle on that, that scope in the beginning, wouldn't that kind of fix some of the problems?
It sure would, Dan. If the scope wasn't constantly moving, and if plans weren't changing, and stuff happens in development, another game came out that has this feature, and now everybody expects that feature to be in our game, or the console that we were developing it for is no longer the main console in the market, and now there's this other console that we have to put it on, or hey, Stadia died, and now the thing that you were using for the backbone of your QA process is gone. I'm citing a specific thing that happened to Bungie, by the way. When Stadia died, it completely screwed up their QA process, and now their game is super buggy and breaking all the time, and people are like, what happened? It's like, Stadia died. They lost a major tool that they were using for building their game. So yeah, there are a lot of things going on in the game development space, and I think it's hard to navigate exactly to diagnose it by pointing at one thing. But the things that I've heard from all the developers that I've talked to, that I hear more than anything else, are games are big now. They're huge monsters that you have to manage. And even if you decide on the scope, nailing that scope is super hard. The second thing is work from home. Work from home is fantastic for people, but it is really tough on creative collaborative projects. It's really hard. For the people who don't know this, I guess I'll just come out and say it. I have 2 full-time jobs. One of them is working at IGN. The other is that I work in SaaS. I'm at a tech startup, right? And I've been doing that for years. That was how I made my money before I
software as a service for those that may not know.
Sorry, software as a service. That was how I made my money before people paid me to write about video games. I can tell you from my personal experience with developing software remotely that if you're developing something that is collaborative, it's much harder to do it remotely. It just takes longer. People aren't at their desk. What used to be tapping somebody on the shoulder and getting it done right then and there is now, you send them a Slack message. Hey, did you see my Slack? Oh, send me an email, put it on my calendar. All right, well, I'm busy. Let's meet in 2 days. And then all of a sudden it's taking you a week to do something that used to take 7 minutes. And I have talked to developers who said that the remote work was the hardest thing for the game development, and especially their QA process that they ever had to go through. One of them is a developer who's currently working at a Bethesda studio, who I'm not going to disclose who that is, but they recently returned to the office and are very happy to be back at the office developing their game, because they said that the years that they were remote, things were just untenable and really hard to do. And I think that you can kind of see that in the quality of games a little bit. I mean, right when the COVID hit, pretty much all the major releases after that, they really started to go downhill in terms of QA. And I think that's a big part of it. Some companies are returning to the office and not seeing that. So I've heard that a lot from developers, which doesn't surprise me too much. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I think those are two of the big ones I've seen.
Well, and that's before even getting to that's what I was gonna say. That's before even getting to management plays a key part, right? We've seen toxic management across studios. We've seen incredible management at studios, and being able to manage your workforce effectively, whether you're in the office or remote, is just like any other industry, is good leaders are rare. And good leaders can make a tremendous difference in how products are developed. And then that's before everything we've talked about, except for scope, which impacts it, right, is before you start to get into publishers worrying about their money and what their fiscal bottom line is, and when a game's going to hit based on their fiscal results, and pleasing shareholders, and forcing games out the door. We've brought it up a million times before. We can bring up Cyberpunk again. That game should not have been forced out in the state it was. And, we're not going to cover that again. But those types of things come into play. There's no one reason. There's just a lot of reasons. And the combination of scope, remote work, complexity, the gaming industry being more profitable than ever before and growing, and, more new workers coming in, studios growing. One thing you cannot do, at least in my experience as development, is take a person off the street, plug them in, and think you're just going to double your efforts. It doesn't work that way. So, you like what we saw at 343 with Halo, right? Where a lot of contract employees coming in and out and losing that institutional knowledge. And therefore the handoff was very poor, and they lost development time, work, and knowledge. And that can impact development. I mean, the list is endless of why games are more problematic today than they were when we were growing up. And I don't know, guys, I don't know if there's a solution. As long as games are continually being, the expectations of scope of games are continually growing, right? Our expectations as consumer, the industry continues to get bigger and broader, and all of the things relating to finances, right? Money, publishers, shareholders, etc., continue to have pressure on delivery of these products. I don't think we're going to see an end to what we're seeing now, at least in the short term. I don't see one.
Yeah. It's certainly true that there's not one solution to solve this industry wide. I think it's up to every studio to kind of figure out their own takeaways and learnings, right? Like CD Projekt Red, for all the mistakes that they made with Cyberpunk, I think they learned valuable lessons that studio will never forget. And so I would be surprised if we ever had to worry about that problem from that studio ever again. You know what I mean? Like, that's just one example. I would hope that Battlefield 2042 taught that studio its lesson. EA tends to take a few hits to the face before they learn things, but that's a great probably learning from them. And I think certain companies are going to have to work on the work from home thing if that's really actually a problem for them. And obviously for employees, it's great to be able to work from home, and so that's going to be a balancing act for each studio to try to see how they manage that. And then I think for game bloat and hitting deadlines and deciding on scope, like, these are all things that each studio needs to develop a process for. And the ones who do it sooner and work out those kinks are going to hopefully avoid snafus like we're seeing now. And the ones that don't are going to get bit. And that's kind of the part of the process, right? That's what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we saw at a CD Projekt Red. They lost, I forget the number off the top of my head. It was a lot of market cap after Cyberpunk hit, right? So they kind of misled with the game, sold extremely well at launch. It was profitable at launch, but they paid on the back end. They lost good employees. A bunch of employees have left CD Projekt Red, and they lost market cap for a while. They're starting to recover a bit, but that really hurt the company pretty badly. I do see the comments, guys. I'm trying to keep up. So a couple people said, stop announcing games early. Don't release games until they're ready. And I think we've touched on that. That comes back to agree that they shouldn't announce a date, right, until they have to. But again, we don't know the situation of what a publisher is asking for or publisher agreements, right? There's probably more pressure than I think any of us realize in terms of release dates based on what we've already said, right? I think certain games are fundamental to the bottom line of companies based on quarter results. And when those games slip, those conversations go all the way up the chain. And I mean, all the way to the top around how that's going to impact the financials of the company. It's not as easy as just saying, release it when it's ready. It's not that simple. It's just not. And the fact that games cost more to make than ever, right? You're talking about some AAA games having investments over $100 million. There's a lot of people that are invested into the success of that game and when it launches and what it's going to do for the company's bottom line. It's not as easy as just saying, I'll just delay it 2 more years. It's fine. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. I'm just, you get to a point where you're just kind of disappointed.
Of course.
Constantly. And it really drags down. I mean, this is my hobby, right? This is what I've done for, 40 years plus, and then it hits this, and you it's like having kids, man. You're never really mad at them. You're just always disappointed when they make stupid decisions. And that's basically how I look at this. And there's nothing you can do, unless we start telling them that we're disappointed in you. We're not mad. We're just disappointed.
Well, and we're the consumers, right? So we always remind people here, stop pledging allegiance to these companies, right? We're the consumers. And you have a right to be disappointed. You have a right to be mad if the money you spend is not met with the expectations set by that company, right?
The first time that a game has come out that I was so super pumped for that I didn't pre-order it and or buy it the day that it released.
I was shocked to hear you didn't buy it.
I mean, I still haven't bought it, and I buy everything. So
yes, exactly.
I buy everything on multiple consoles. I'm just getting to the point now where it's just like, you know what? I guess I just wait.
I do want to talk about us buying things and the minimum viable product thing, because I think we kind of didn't talk about that a lot, which I think sometimes there's this perception that even if a game sells well, if it sells well, if there's backlash, that the publishers and the developers don't care. And I don't think that's true at all. The second thing is that minimum viable products are ruining the industry and that everybody just wants to get out the one thing that works. And I think that that's true some of the time, but it's for a very specific type of game wherein that's kind of okay. And it's almost part of the model. And with that, it really comes down to expectations of like the game not being finished. And I think that there's certain models where you kind of want that, right? So the first thing is us buying games. Obviously, that is their bottom line. And a game that sold well is going to continue to be successful, even if it is like Jedi Survivor and has a bunch of issues on one of the platforms and their reputation is besmirched. But the publisher and the developers aren't stupid. And they have marketing teams, and they know that their reputation is currency in the game space. CD Projekt Red learned that very well. They sold, millions of copies of Cyberpunk before anybody even complained about the frame rate issue or the performance issues because the game wasn't out yet. But that doesn't mean that their culture didn't change, that they didn't get completely slapped in the face and go back and change it. And so I think you can buy a game and also criticize it heavily, and the community can have massive backlash, and they still care about the backlash even if they sold it. CD Projekt Red didn't go, well, yeah, we got completely destroyed as our reputation, but look how many millions we sold, so who cares? Let's just go and make Witcher 4, and we'll do it on the exact same way we did Cyberpunk. They're not doing that. It's like
boycotting places. That doesn't work. It never has.
But I don't think you have to boycott for that feedback loop to work. I think what matters is the feedback. If a game sells millions of copies, but its reviews on Metacritic are really low and people are talking about it like they're upset, I think they do care. And I think that they realize that their IPs don't exist in a vacuum, that they can't just sell a game and then continually, the Battlefield brand They realized what 2042 did to that brand, which is why if they didn't care, they would have taken your money and never fixed that game. But they did fix it according to Ains. And that
they not only fixed it, right? They put a team, sorry to interrupt you, but they put a team to fix it. They then put Vince Zampella over Battlefield as a whole. We've talked about this. And they hired Marcus Leto and set up a new studio in Washington to build out the future of Battlefield so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, exactly. So my point is that is a sign that we're not in a completely lost spot in the industry where games just get released broken and nobody cares. Everyone who's released a bad game that I can point to has cared and tried to fix the game and tried to not repeat those mistakes. And that's great. That means that we're having an impact even though we're buying their games. It's not like they're just ignoring us and putting out a crappy product on purpose. They do care and they're trying to do better. So I think that's like good news that nobody's being evil in this situation, for what I can tell.
Well, not nobody, but most.
I mean, probably some people, but those aren't the developers. By and large, are not trying to hurt the consumer, and I think that's.
And to your point, the developers aren't the ones making these decisions, right? The developers.
Some people
sometimes,
yeah,
of course, but mostly of the AAA games we're talking about, right? The developers are working a day job, just like all of us do, working really hard with a lot of pride, oftentimes working extreme hours to make the best game possible. But when you are one of several hundred people, or sometimes even thousands of people working on a game, you're just one person, man. You can want the best, you can work your hardest, but at the end of the day, that's a small cog in the machine.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about is releasing things before they're ready, or an MVP, minimum viable product, which is funny that MVP is an acronym with two meanings and they're almost the opposite, right? Most valuable player, minimum viable product.
Most people think most valuable player, but we're talking minimum viable product.
I always think minimum viable product, but I don't watch sports, as you guys know. So I don't, and I've never been called an MVP, obviously. The idea that releasing something earlier before it's ready, or having a minimum viable product, is a bad thing, I think, is sometimes it's a little bit more complicated than that. There are certain games where surely you can tell that the game was put out before it was ready and it was half baked and it feels bad. 2042 is one of those. Like, the game should have been delayed, right? There's no excuse for that, and it was way below expectations. And then there's other ones where, like Minecraft was released on console, and it was a full release. It was not a beta or like early access edition. And I would argue that was 100% a minimum viable product. But the reason that existed on the console and was okay there is because players had every expectation that it was going to be fleshed out over time. And now it has parity with the PC version. And that was the right choice, because it got people on console, present company included, hooked on that game before it was a full fleshed out game. And we were along for the ride. And there's other games that wouldn't exist if they didn't have that model. I would argue Rocket League was at launch kind of in that same boat. That game has been optimized to heck and launched at kind of an MVP situation. The original Destiny was at that level. And I think certain games where the communication with the audience is, look, it's not going to be the game everybody is imagining in their heads when it comes out, but that's kind of part of why we're releasing it early. Pixelbit pointed out Grounded, fantastic example as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that that's bad. I think really it's about communication and trust between the payer slash gamer and the person developing it. And I think you have to take it on a case by case basis, because I don't think anyone is being mean when they put out their game before it's ready. And I think that the idea of a minimum viable product always being a bad thing is not true. I think sometimes it really is helpful for the industry.
Agreed. And just to end cap this, I think it was Captain Chats said, I'm not paying £70. I guess he's in England, right, or UK, until the game is finished. Fine, that's your absolute right totally as a consumer. Fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. I understand that viewpoint entirely.
And you're allowed to advocate for that position, but I would argue that there's a lot of people who don't want that, and there's a lot of games that wouldn't exist if that were true. And I'm certainly not your ally in that, because I don't think that I disagree. I think that some games I'm pissed when they come out and they aren't ready. And I know Dan is in that camp by and large because he doesn't play the type of games that aren't finished. But he's also played Hitman, a game that came out in an unfinished state because it's a live service game, and now it's very close to finish.
He loves poking you with the Hitman live service needle, doesn't he?
Well, it wasn't finished when it came out. Look at this. That studio wouldn't exist without a minimum viable product model because they were leasing that property. Well, they were technically in the studio at the time. They were part of it, but they had to release it episodic because they didn't have the money to finish the game. And that they were so successful in that model that they repeated it and then eventually bought the property from Square and became their own studio. And now they're this massive success story and they owe it to a minimum viable product model. That's a great example. So that's why I bring it up.
As soon as they could get away from that model, they did and released the entire game.
But you can't. But that's the thing. You can't be like, oh yeah, well now that the game I care about succeeded using it, let's shut the door on everyone else behind us. You know what I mean?
Because sometimes
that's like people who become rich.
Better way.
That's like people who become rich using loopholes and then they close the loopholes as soon as they're rich. You know what I mean? Like that's literally what you're advocating for. So.
Yeah, 100% I will. It's like, listen,
okay.
you did a great job.
As long as you
thank you for being there and thank you for doing what you did. But we don't need you anymore because we found somebody better. Right? Sorry.
Well, lots of companies out there that could use a little
we appreciate
help,
you.
with making their game, so.
By the way, Edwin on Hoeg's channel called out No Man's Sky, and Hello Games is a perfect example here. Yes.
Although I would say that game made a huge mistake of absolutely not communicating to its audience at all that it was that type of game. It is now in retrospect a success story, but they should have said, this is the game we're envisioning in the future. This is the game we want, but it's not going to be that at launch. And I think if they had done that, No Man's Sky would be one of the biggest games right now, like in the world. I think it really would. But the fact that they messaged it as when this comes out, it's going to be amazing, it completely cut them off at the knees. And I don't know if they'll ever fully recover from that because that could have been the biggest game ever. I think it could have been the next Minecraft, but they didn't communicate it like Minecraft did. Minecraft made it clear their game wasn't done at every step of the way. And No Man's Sky kind of did that in retrospect after they failed spectacularly, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big success story now, but it took them a while to get there.
Yeah. And they got the messaging wrong. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Well, I've had the discussion before about Cyberpunk, like, not in the same vein as Unfinished, right? Because that's more unoptimized and unpolished. But will it ever reach the heights that like Witcher 3 did because of the reputation it got for the way it launched? Probably not.
Definitely not. Yep.
By the way, Captain says, I feel reviewers have a duty to take performance of a game into the review score. We actually covered that. I think you might have joined late. We covered that prior to this conversation. So, you may want to check that out. Let's get some super chats, guys, and then we'll move on from this topic. Good conversation, though. Really appreciate it. And shout out to the we passed 300 live people watching. Appreciate all of you. Pompa's in the house.
Pampa with $10 super chats. Shout out to Elden Ring for being a complete game with very little to no issues. Has to be a part of the reason why the game was praised. Also, would like Travis yelling more every Bitcast. Let it out, brother.
Elden Ring, I reviewed Elden Ring on PC prior to day one patch, and yes, fine. That game was a phenomenon.
It can be done.
Yep.
All you need is like 6 years and hundreds of millions of dollars in budget and hundreds of employeys and
and top leadership,
and work in a country where they're not working from home at all and they 20-hour day crunch. Yeah, it's great.
That's all you gotta do.
Totally can do.
Go get them, Japanese.
I mean, I'm for it. I'm an American. I love crunch. I want to work 20-hour days, 7 days a week. I'm a big advocate of the 7-day work week. This is not even joking.
I'm talking about From Software and Capcom, as the two that keep putting out stuff. I'm sure Final Fantasy will be perfect.
Well, I was going to mention, so we've got Zelda, right? And I think we're all confident that that's expected to run at 15 frames part of the time. And it'll just be accepted because it's Zelda and it's the Switch, but that'll be fine. Diablo, we already know.
Look though, guys, The question is it going to feel good at 15 frames on the Switch? And it probably will.
It probably will
feel
yeah.
fantastic. And that's my point. That's why the frame rate fascists they have a bad worldview, because they don't understand. They're losing the
I got them started, Dan. I got them started.
Sorry.
We've got Diablo, which we already know runs great. I've played it both console and PC. It's excellent. Then we have Street Fighter 6, which is Capcom. Capcom hasn't let us down yet. Street Fighter 6 is a huge return for them. The demo is beautiful and runs great. I have a hard time thinking that's going to be problematic. And then we get Final Fantasy 16 in late June from Square. We'll see what that looks like. Square has been very hit or miss. But this is Final Fantasy, their biggest baby. So we'll see. And it's on one platform.
Before we move on to completely different topics,
I have 2 more super chats.
Okay, great.
Let me get those real quick. Thank you, Pompa. Appreciate you. And just general shout out to Elden Ring, because I haven't mentioned the game this episode, and it's not a Bitcast without me saying how good Elden Ring is. All right.
Also, expansion coming soon. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zilthan gave us 2 super chats. So Dan, I'll read these back to back. Go ahead.
All right. Apologies for missing the segment, but to double back, what are your thoughts on the review splits into categories with composite score versus single holistic score? I remember GamePro reviews fondly for breaking things down into categories. Thanks.
Thank you, Zilthan.
I'm a hardliner on this issue, which is that the point of the number is to give you a snapshot view if you're not reading the review, which, by the way, if you do that, come on, please read the review. But some people do it for reasonable reasons, which is like, oh, I don't want to risk any spoilers, so I'm just going to look at the score and then go, okay, look, I got a 9, great. I'm going to play it and then I'll read the review later, which I think is fine. My worldview is that give it a number, and it should not be a decimal number or a fraction. It should just be a number, and that's it.
From 1 to 100.
No, 1 to 10, 1 to 5. Honestly, the best review system is thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, that's the best review system in the world, because it's clear immediately.
We found something we disagree with on reviews. Yeah, but clear immediately doesn't make it better.
Sure it does.
No.
If that's the whole point of the score, right? Because the review is to give you an in-depth impression, but the score is literally for the people who aren't reading. So wouldn't this be the most sense? Because if you do a score, then they have to know what the score means. You have to explain it to them. And so the reason I say this is the best system is because everybody knows what this means and this means.
No, they don't. Not in context of a game.
Yes, they do. Like, play it, don't play it. You know what I mean?
So if we've talked before about the mental kind of thought process of game reviews, right? And technically a 5 would be a middle game, but it's not really, because most games below 5 don't get reviewed. So therefore it's closer to a 7, right?
So that's true. Yeah. But anyway,
we've literally talked about that on this show.
I know, and we disagreed. Yeah.
No, we didn't.
Yeah,
no, we didn't. You literally explained why Dan Stapleton wrote an article around why most games reviewed are 7s or higher.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
But you're saying that if it were actually,
I'm saying the context is, what is this then?
No. Bad. Dislike. All those things.
No, that's ridiculous.
My point is, if the idea of a score is supposed to immediately give the reader a verdict without telling them anything really specifically, the problem with a numbered system is that they have to know what the numbers mean. The problem with a decimal system is that it's insane, because there's too many options and you're straddling the fence. And really the best solution is yes, no. Should you play it? A recommendation or lack of recommendation or specific non-recommendation, I think, is the best system. But I prefer, obviously, I've been indoctrinated by IGN into a 10-point system, because each of the numbers has a very specific meaning. And I think that's important. 9 equals amazing, 8 equals great, etc. And so my problem with the composite score is that it gets a little too close to doing what the review is doing. Just read the review if you want to know the specific breakdown stuff. You know what I mean?
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah, that's my problem with it.
I think so. What we do is we do a core score, like you're mentioning, and then we have a couple additional details in our summary. So like average time investment to finish the game, replayability factor, those types of things. So, Zoltan, thank you for the 2 super chats. Appreciate you. All right. Oop, maybe I should take it off the screen. That would help. What were we going to get to here? So, Travis, you started to say something, and I said, "Let me get to these two super
No,
chats."
it's fine. I'll do it in my outro. Let's yeah.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to cover the CMA blocking the MS and Activision deal. Sadly, Hoeg, it looks like not going to join us today, and I'm sure he will. He said he has his own video. He's trying to get ready on it, and he will obviously, if he's here next week with us, we can kind of cover some more details about it as they come out. So we'll do that. But Travis was looking over the deal, so we can just talk about that. Also, want to quickly talk about Armored Core and PlayStation Xbox, so we'll get to that. Dan has to drop out. He has to leave at this moment. So, Dan, we'll let you go ahead.
Enjoy the rest of the show, guys. I will not be here next week. I will be in New York, but I will be watching. And don't forget Hoeg's live stream on Saturday, May 6th. Nice. Right?
Oh, wow. That is this week, isn't it? Thank you. Good shout out.
He's doing his raising money for the offices of the hospitals that he helped him through his stroke and recovery. So
yes, next Saturday he's doing a long live stream, a lot of guests. We're going to try to swing by as well. So absolutely.
All right, guys. I will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Dan, you should definitely watch this later so you can see that I also know legalese.
I might be watching it on my way to where I'm going right now.
Fantastic.
So I will stay tuned.
All right, sir. See you
guys. We'll see you guys. Thanks, Chad.
Have a good trip. All right. Oh my God. We've got a one-on-one show, Travis. What do we do now?
We kiss.
No, we're not doing that.
We get a screenshot, Haynes. I want you to do
we'll include. Wait, where do I go? I can't. Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's the closest I'm getting. That already feels weird.
Yeah, it was good. I like that. That was dating sim.
So we'll keep an eye on chat here, and we'll just include you, have a casual conversation. But yes, the CMA published their final report on Microsoft acquiring Activision-Blizzard. They decided to block the deal. Now, from what I understand, and I know you've read a lot of this, from what I understand, it's not so much relating to PlayStation's console dominance in the UK. Now, remember, the CMA is speaking to the UK specifically. This is not the EU. This is not the US or the FTC. But in the UK, most of their concerns were cited around the future of what cloud gaming represents. And they cited that Microsoft would basically, for lack of a better term, kind of control a future monopoly in the cloud gaming space in the UK, and that they were trying to prevent that from occurring because, in their words, this would harm consumers in the long term. Is that the gist of it?
That is basically their conclusion. So a little background on this. The report is 400 pages long, more than 400 pages. I think it's like 418 or something like that. I have been doing some light reporting for IGN, and so have read over 300 pages of the document. By today, I will probably have read all of the document by the end of today. And so the document goes over a number of things. Basically, all of the arguments brought forth, it states the positions of both party, or all three parties, third parties, which are Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft, and PlayStation. Or Sony rather. It also cites other things submitted by other parties as well. And then it states the CMA's findings on each of these. And there's some really interesting things about it. Obviously, the reason they blocked it surprised a lot of people, which is that they said the reason they're blocking it is to protect cloud gaming. Cloud gaming currently represents 1% to 2% of the gaming market. It is the smallest by far of any of those things. It wasn't to block mobile gaming or console gaming or all the stuff that's involved in this. And it's really interesting why. So I want to first talk about the console market, because I've been doing a lot of reporting on why they disagreed with Sony's claim that Call of Duty could be used to bankrupt Sony, or they could do a total foreclosure strategy there, which is basically removing the game from their platform. Basically, it came down to what they call in the document the critical diversion rate, which is the rate at which people would have to leave the PlayStation and buy an Xbox for it to be profitable to Microsoft to take the game off of PlayStation. right? The critical diversion rate. How many people have to do that? And what is the lifetime value, LTV, of those people who they now acquired? And basically, they ran the numbers in every scenario and decided it would be incredibly unprofitable, losses in the billions to Microsoft to do that. And that it wouldn't be a viable strategy. And so it was interesting to see them disagree with Sony. And I've talked to Hoeg about this offline. I know not anything special, but I know that you and I and Dan, in our stream or our thread, were kind of talking about this earlier. And he sort of thinks that a lot of the CMA's findings are kind of in search of the answer that they wanted, right? Like they kind of they had a answer already.
They had the answer and they found out how to get to it.
They found a way to get to it, right? And I don't know if I agree with that. I'm actually excited to debate Hoeg on this because I'm very informed finally about, I've actually read the legal document as well. I get where what he's going for. And I think in certain scenarios, you can see that they tried their best to see if Sony was correct. Like they really tried to do the math, and I think they even tried to be favorable to Sony's math, like in a way, but they ultimately drew the responsible conclusion, which is no, that is not possible. I think Sony's crazy about that one. And they do that in a couple other categories because the acquisition involves so much stuff and there's so many arguments on all different sides. But the thing that they ended up blocking it for is cloud gaming, which is very interesting. Not Game Pass subscription, not console gaming, not mobile, cloud gaming. And the reason that surprised people is because it's a really small part of the gaming market, and that Microsoft does not have a clear way to dominate the market right now. And even if they did, it would be a tiny market because nobody cloud games. However, the conclusion that I drew from the CMA report is that there are facts that they found that they aren't allowed to tell us because they saw things that were cut out of the report. And one of those, because of for privacy reasons, right? Like specific figures are cut out of the report. And the other thing is the CMA was able to see Microsoft's future business plans regarding parts of the market, including cloud gaming. And my theory is that they saw something in Microsoft's theoretical future cloud gaming strategies that scared them, that made them go like, oh, wow, if that happens, then we're screwed. Then Microsoft will just dominate the market. Because Microsoft, importantly, has advantages that Sony doesn't have and that Nintendo doesn't have, which is that they have a cloud. They have Microsoft Azure, which is huge. Which is an enormous advantage. And if cloud gaming ever becomes a major market, Microsoft will be one of 3 companies that is even remotely capable of competing in that space. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, the 3 big clouds, right? And so obviously Apple and Amazon right now are not really serious competitors in the gaming space, with Amazon being pretty well positioned to be one in the future with Twitch and the fact that they're Amazon and they have AWS, which is the best cloud in the world. And
they don't have Phil Harrison leading it. Go on.
And they don't have Phil Harrison leading it is important. Although who knows? I think he's hireable, Amazon. I think he's looking for a job out there.
He's going to lead season gaming into the future.
Nice. It sounds like he already is. Just kidding. So yeah, I think a lot of people are assuming that the CMA's finding is based on bad information. The thing I gained from the report is that they actually went through great lengths to understand the gaming market, to the point where it actually surprised me, because they made some really good arguments and points where I was like, honestly, from a regulatory body, I'm not used to seeing that level of scrutiny. And it's very clear that the lack of scrutiny that the FTC made when they approved the Facebook acquisition of Instagram has really made a lot of these governing bodies check themselves, right? Like they're trying to be extra safe. My problem with the CMA's finding is I still think it was a wrong decision. And the reason I think it was a wrong decision is because it is regulation made speculatively, which I do not think is how regulation is supposed to happen. It is them regulating a market that doesn't exist yet based on how they think it will look. And they don't know how it'll look. They just don't. and they don't know. They probably don't have the foresight to realize that Amazon and Google are kind of already competing in this space, right? And that they're already big competitors. And so Microsoft's getting hit on both sides. So they'll still be competing against Sony and Nintendo in the console gaming space. And in the cloud, they'll have 2 more competitors. And I don't think you regulate based on speculation of what the future is going to be. I think you regulate on current market. And then if in the future Microsoft does develop a marketing or a monopoly in cloud gaming, then you work to break up their company, which is not unprecedented. That's kind of what you have to do when a monopoly happens. You have to break
That's happened
apart.
before, yeah.
And I think that they're worried that Microsoft will have a vertical monopoly with their cloud gaming and the fact that they also make consoles and that they also make software and all that stuff. And there have been concerns about Microsoft having a vertical monopoly for years because they already do a bunch of things that kind of seem like they're a computer's monopoly, right? Because they're allowed to have a cloud and make software and make computers and blah, blah, blah. And so I get that. But the problem with them blocking it is they don't know what the future looks like, and they are blocking it with a claim to. And even if they saw a Microsoft business plan of a great strategy that they're going to execute, they don't know that strategy is going to work, and they don't know that they'll become the market leader.
Are you telling me that Zune is not going to be the market leader?
Exactly, right.
Okay.
I think that there's risk in regulating these sort of transactions based on things that haven't occurred yet and that are maybe even not likely to occur based on what you think is going to happen. And somebody in the comments is saying you lose nothing. You lose more if you approve the deal. You lose nothing if you block. That's not true at all. You lose a lot if you block. For one, this could cripple the United Kingdom's economy because not approving the deal, depending on if other regulatory bodies do approve it. Also, it now gives the perception to the UK that they're anti-business. This is a very odd move, and it makes them seem like they're more politically motivated than they are an actual regulatory body. I'm not saying that that's what I think. I actually think that their report is fairly respectable in terms of like all the steps that they went through and the stuff that they did. But I think that I don't think that's how regulatory bodies should work. Basically, I think they should. So
yeah, no, well said, and thank you for going over that in detail. I wanted to shout out our good friend OBM One Bad Mother over from Xbox Era. What's up, dude? He said CMA isn't concerned about Microsoft's share of cloud as much as they're afraid of how Microsoft alone can leverage ease of access in a way that nobody can. And I think we're kind of talking in two of the same in a way. I think what he's pointing to, based on his comments and others have said, right, is around how Microsoft will be in a unique position to allow people ease of access to games, partially because of their cloud infrastructure, as you said.
Correct.
In a way that Sony and Nintendo, being their primary competitors in the market space, cannot.
Yes. The problem with their argument, and the reason I think it's going to fall apart if it gets appealed, is that Microsoft already has all the tools to enact a cloud-based gaming monopoly. They're not gaining anything from Activision that they don't already have that lets them do that. The only thing they're gaining is specific intellectual properties that, according to the CMA, Call of Duty plus all of the other cloud advantages Microsoft has equals monopoly. That's their argument, right? And the problem I have with that argument is that Call of Duty is not the games industry. We don't know if it's going to continue to be popular in the future as much as it is. We don't know if it's going to get knocked out by another competitor or if Activision will even make it, or, there are a million different factors that could impact that. Right. The blocking the Activision-Blizzard deal does not actually block Microsoft from executing exactly the strategy that they were already planning on executing. True. Because they already have the cloud infrastructure. They already make software. They already have game studios. They already are a console manufacturer. The only thing it does is it prevents you from getting the IPs that Activision-Blizzard has. And the CMA cites specifically Call of Duty and World of Warcraft as being the reasons that this is going to create a monopoly, because apparently Call of Duty and World of Warcraft are just too dangerous to be allowed on the the gaming cloud platform exclusively on Xbox. And I think that that's a pretty weak argument, because creativity is not, you can't have a monopoly on creativity. People can always make additional things. The second place cloud provider of Microsoft created a a really great cloud gaming service that immediately took off, could make a Call of Duty clone. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. There's nothing unique or copyrightable about.
Of course.
You know what I mean? You can't get a patent for Call
Yeah.
of Duty on military shooters. That's just not a thing you can do. So I think Microsoft is in a pretty strong position to fight this. The question will be, do they fight it? Does the fact that the CMA blocked it at all make it more likely that the FTC and the EU will block it? Does it? It changes a lot, and I think it could end up being a very deadly blow to the deal happening at all. But I don't think I'm not mad at the CMA for this. I think that I think that they have genuinely held beliefs and concerns about this. I take issue with the way that they made the decision and the specific points that they called out. But reading the rest of the report, I actually gained confidence that they're not basically just being partisan hacks, at least fully. Like, they looked into it and they don't draw crazy conclusions. They are very wise in their conclusion about console gaming. That was the part that, to me, about Microsoft being able to make money off of taking Call of Duty off of PlayStation and how ridiculous that argument is. All of that stuff I thought was actually pretty well reasoned. I just think that their conclusion and the specific thing that they got worried about is weird. Granted, I don't have all the information. I haven't seen the business plans for Microsoft that they've seen, but yeah, I wasn't, angry about this. And obviously I have no stake in the game because I don't work for Microsoft. So.
Good breakdown. Thank you for the details. I think good conversation, good points. I think chat's discussing it, making some good points as well. I know that a lot of people are caught up in this, and we try not to talk about this every week because, quite frankly, it bores me to tears in the sense of it's not really focusing on games. I think we discuss it when something major like this happens, but otherwise there's way too much attention paid to this, in my opinion, from a pure gamer standpoint. But thank you for that. We'll see. We'll see what happens from here. I think we said we'll have to have Hoeg on next week. We joked in our DMs that we'll allow Hoeg to watch your breakdown and grade you. So if he's here next week, we'll see what grade he gives you.
I expect him to disagree with me on my conclusion about the CMA, and I totally get why he would do that. But I haven't read certain parts of the report. I need to go back. But I will be interested to hear his take on it, because I'll actually be able to debate him fully on this one, since I am informed. I read a legal document.
I'm sorry.
I actually like reading legal documents. Here's another thing about the CMA final report. It was actually super engaging. I was expecting to be bored to tears, and every time I got to it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I also don't have a problem with reading legalese. I have like a affinity for technical writing and like just legal writing for some reason. It just is how my brain works. And so when I read that stuff, I don't have a problem with digesting it, but usually it's boring content. This wasn't boring content. It was super interesting. You got to hear from like Sony's perspective, and they broke down, here's the argument Sony's making, and here's the ones we think are valid, and here's the ones we think aren't valid. Here's the ones Microsoft's making, and then here's our modeling and the models we ran. And every page, it was a page turner somehow. The CMA's final report is a page turner. I'm not actually being sarcastic. Like, actually, it was super interesting. So, and yes, I am a nerd.
Fair enough. So we'll tackle that more when Hoeg is back, hopefully next week. And we'll obviously kind of talk more down the line around what the EU and FTC are going to do and what that looks like. But Microsoft was very clear. Brad Smith came out, their head of legal counsel, and came out and said that, disappointed in the decision. This does not stop them. They're going to continue pushing on getting this deal done. It's kind of funny, right? Because just before, like a week before the CMA blocked this deal, we heard from Microsoft saying that basically they're just going to push the deal through in the US. And if the FTC wants to challenge them and have a lawsuit, they're willing to do that. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of unfolds from this point forward.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Microsoft's next move, because I feel like they're at a turning point where, they could cut and run at this point if they wanted to, and I don't think anybody would begrudge them from doing that. But they would lose a lot of money, not as much as they're going to lose by buying a company, but I guess you don't lose it, right?
Not technically.
You use it. This would be them just like losing money, but I don't think they will. I think they're up for the fight against the CMA, and I think they will win that fight if they go against it. It's just that there's so many other fights they would have to win that their situation is way more precarious than it was. Because I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but I think we all see the merits and drawbacks of the situation. The argument that this acquisition would present a monopoly at all is kind of laughable, which is what they're supposed to be guarding against. But what these regulatory bodies are doing is they're guarding against not that problem. Everybody kind of agrees that monopoly isn't real, but like in the US, you have the FTC looking at completely unrelated problems like workers' conditions and workers' rights, which is not what that body is supposed to guard against, right? It's not.
Right.
They're kind of just being activists rather than doing their job
overreach.
Description. Yeah, overreach a little bit. And I would say the CMA is kind of doing that a little bit too. I don't know the situation on the EU because I haven't read their stuff, but I think we just have a lot of like interesting arguments. But like if they were just doing the to the letter interpretation, this would be a pretty cut and dried. But there's just more involved. There's a very political landscape. The people who are in power of each of these agencies at this present time, and who knows if that'll change in the near future, have a very specific worldview and slant. And then the Facebook, Instagram miss, I think, is just like always in these people's minds of like, we screwed that up, and now they're super wary of big tech, and I don't blame them for it. So it's an interesting. I'm fascinated by this stuff.
Okay, well, I think we came to a conclusion after that 25 minutes that blame Facebook seems like the logical consensus.
I mean, I'm always in favor of that, just in general.
Exactly. Yeah, let's just blame Facebook.
Or sorry, Meta.
Stop it.
Say my name.
All right. Obviously, we'll have more on that. And like we said, when Hoeg's back, we'll talk about this piece. And then when meaningful things happen next, we'll talk about it. But it's not something we want to cover week in, week out, because it's ridiculous. Real quick, I want to just touch on the fiscal results of Xbox and PlayStation that came out this week. I can run through these numbers just in case anyone missed them. Some interesting stuff here. And just to be clear, there's always two differentiators to keep in mind here. One, Microsoft breaks down their gaming segment and Sony breaks down their gaming segment in different ways. They call out different things, so there's not one-to-one comparisons to be made here. And two, their fiscal years are actually different time periods. Microsoft's fiscal year ends in the middle of the year on June 30th. Sony's fiscal year ends on March 31st. So this report that came out this week, both from Sony and Microsoft, is Microsoft's third quarter. It is Sony's final quarter, and therefore they're reporting year-end results. So it can get a little confusing when you break it down that way. But some interesting numbers to call out here. On the Xbox side, we saw hardware down significantly, 30% year over year. That was partially expected. I know Amy Hood, the CFO over at Microsoft, came out and talked about supply, various other things. Their content and services revenue was up 5% in constant currency. So, if mitigating for currency fluctuations. Overall gaming revenue was down 4%, but Nadella, Amy Hood said that those were actually above projections. So they did better than they expected. And then Nadella came out and said that it was a record quarter for monthly active users on Xbox. They surpassed 120 million monthly active users on Xbox Live, which is that's a lot. That's good to hear. And as well as devices connecting to Xbox Live, nearly 1 billion in revenue from Game Pass and subscription services. So very notable there for Xbox. On the PlayStation side of the house, they mostly propped up first-party sales and console sales, which they tend to do. Keep in mind, like I said, this is their full fiscal year. Their sales were up 33% year over year, which is huge. They sold 6.3 million PS5s in the quarter, which is the highest all-time for PlayStation. So if you think about PlayStation having been around for nearly 30 years now, and the success of the PS2 and PS4 specifically, the fact that the PS5 is selling at a rate greater than that is hugely impressive. They sold 19.1 million PS5s in the whole year. They are forecasting 25 million for the next fiscal year. So starting on April 1st, a few weeks ago, through next March 31st, they're forecasting 25 million PS5s to be sold, which is one hell of a number. Their first party sales were up 41% year over year, primarily crediting God of War Ragnarok. but they did see a decrease, which is kind of strange, in non-first party sales. So third party sales and content were down on PlayStation. Kind of interesting. So anyway, nothing to really, no huge news here. I just like to call those numbers out because I find them interesting. I'm a math numbers geek when it comes to this stuff. You're looking at two geeks on the screen right now, generally. But it's kind of cool. Usually four. And it's cool to see, you know, kind of where Xbox and PlayStation are seeing successes, seeing falters, and the differences between the two. So anything you want to add on that?
Nope. No, sales numbers is probably the thing I care about least in the industry. Anytime I see like, here's how many sales and greatest selling and money made, and my eyes just gloss over and I want them all to burn.
Yeah, I get it. I just think it's impressive. Obviously, PlayStation has turned the corner with the supply constraints, right? Getting PS5s out the door to places. And they've crushed on that front. PlayStation also announced that Guerrilla, so Horizon Studios, studio director, was promoted to the head of development strategy for all of PlayStation. So Angie Smets is now head of that development strategy for all first-party studios. And they also noted Guerrilla themselves are working on Aloy's next adventure. A lot of sites said they confirmed Horizon sequel. That's not what they said. Guerrilla said Aloy's next adventure and an exciting online project. So it seems like Guerrilla is being pulled into the Sony live
you
service.
Finish Forbidden West, right?
I didn't finish Forbidden West, no.
Yeah, so if you finished Forbidden West, you'd already know that there's going to be a Horizon sequel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's to be expected. But that's not what they said, though.
But I mean, it's already, like, you know what I mean? Like, after Horizon 1, we knew there was going to be a sequel because of the way that game ended, too. Like, we know there's going to be another game. So.
I know. I just don't like to assume. They may come out with they could come out with some offset game. You know what I mean?
Ames is the guy who's sitting in the theater after the movie, and the movie ends with a black screen and it says "to be continued," and he goes, "I wonder if they'll make another one."
Stop it! That's not what we're talking about here.
That's basically what they do in these games. They give you it's literally like a cliffhanger. You know, he's like, "I wonder if they'll finish that plot. I hope we get another game."
Hey, Netflix has shown us they don't always finish that thought.
That's true.
And then the last piece,
they got a pretty good record of actually finishing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And then we got Armored Core 6 news this week, which I'm pretty pumped for. I'm not a big Armored Core fan, but yeah, man. So it's releasing August 25th.
Yeah.
And a what?
Dan and I are. We discovered that on that episode where we guessed which games he likes and hates, and we both like Armored Core. Do you remember that?
That's right. Dan going way back to the early days.
But I think he might play this one because of his nostalgia. Yeah.
Yeah. So August 25th it releases. Has continued to kill it. We'll see if this release kills it as well. One interesting thing I saw about it is it's $60. Well, I guess Bandai Namco is one of the few publishers who hasn't upped to $70 yet, which is interesting. Cool. There is a detail I found interesting, and we're lucky Dan's not here, but for those wondering. So it was Xbox Wire did an interview with the producer and game director. And they said specifically, I found this sentence interesting. I'm sure you will too. First and foremost, what we are aiming to create with Armored Core 6 is a new mech action game as a product of what the current day From Software can output based on the knowledge and experiences we've gained from developing these recent titles. So I took that as, obviously you have a lot of learnings and development and structure and everything else, but I took that as, okay, there's going to be some mechanics in this game that are familiar because they also say, and this is a direct quote as well, in our approach to difficulty, let's say, for example, that a certain boss is giving you trouble with a devastating laser attack that sweeps across the battle arena and it's hard to avoid. One possible solution in such a situation could be to go back to the assembly, reconfigure your mech with reverse jointed legs that has excellent jumping ability, or a booster with a powerful upward thrust so the attack can be avoided vertically. And what he's speaking to, right, is playing, learning, replaying, learning, and overcoming a challenge, which you and I both know. We know what they're talking about
Dan
here.
Hates that. Yeah.
So this made me more excited for the game, personally. But I can see if maybe I didn't play a ton of the old Armored Cores. I don't know if they were always that way, and I just don't know.
They weren't.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean they
So-
were like that. They were like that. But they weren't what I was going to say is that they weren't Souls likes explicitly, but they
Sure.
definitely were challenging games where you had to like configure and try to get best, you
Okay.
get good essentially, or at least adapt and beat your head against the wall. But I can't remember which Armored Cores Dan said he hated. I remember he liked some and then didn't like some other ones, but I bet you he'll play this game and maybe it'll even give him the Souls like bug. I'm not sure. But I'm interested to see how much. But basically, when I saw that trailer, I immediately was like, this looks like kind of a Souls like when all those missiles went everywhere and then he was like zipping around. I was like, I think this is going to be Souls like. So we'll see. That's interesting though.
Yeah, they said right here, these are things that From Software action games have always tried to emphasize, and we of course developed AC6 with this in mind. However, as the basic format of Armored Core is completely different from games in the Souls lineage, there really aren't any specific aspects of gameplays or mechanics that can be served as is. So we've tried to incorporate this know-how and experience at points of the game where it can coexist and be easily digested in the sense of Armored Core without tainting the original qualities of what made it Armored Core great. So it definitely feels like it's going to have some influence, but maybe not, not going to be a Souls experience per se. The interesting thing about this interview with Xbox too is he said that initial concepts for this game started in 2017. A handful of From staff, including Miyazaki, were involved as they mapped out the concept for the game and the maps, kind of the map layout of the game. And then it was handed over to director Yamamura. So
I wonder what happened at 2017 that convinced them to put it on the back burner.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah, I know. I was trying to say, I don't know if it was necessarily on the back burner, but just kind of a secondary team working on it, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's probably right around the time they were deciding to go ahead with Elden Ring or not. You know what I mean? Like that.
And being an open world.
Yeah, that
Souls
sounds like
experience.
that. Yeah, that sounds like that decision point, and they went one direction instead of the other.
No doubt.
Interesting.
But it looks cool, man. And a good release date. End of August. Perfect. Come on.
Great game. Great release date.
And that'll be what?
There's a lot of interesting summer games. There's that what's the other one with the magic one, where you're shooting spells and stuff?
Yes.
It's some weird fantasy.
We just did a preview on it.
Yeah. Whatever.
Immortals of Avium.
Immortals of Avium. I almost said it was called Immortals and then almost Avium, but I would not have guessed that they were both in the title. There you go. That's hilarious.
Yeah, so that's that's July 20th.
20th, okay.
July 20th, yep. And then this is August 25th, and then that means we're going to get Starfield 2.5 weeks after this.
2.5 years after.
2.5 weeks after Armored Core, and then I think for many of us, Starfield will take over for a while. So, yeah,
in 2025, yeah, it's going to be huge.
Stop it. It'll be better in 2025. You know that. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up on out of here. As we already said at the start, Redfall, look for my Redfall review. I'm sure IGN's review, other sites' reviews tomorrow as we're recording this. So they'll be out tomorrow, Monday.
The review will be up tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah,
so I'm trying to get to the point to have my full review done. I can't say any more, obviously, but look for that. In case you are interested, I interviewed the composer of the soundtrack for Redfall. He goes by JB. His name is Jean-Nic Bontemps. Incredible dude. It was a fantastic conversation. And he pointed out a lot of things based on his career, schooling, what scoring for a game is like. And he is even composing the soundtrack for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. He told me in the interview, which I did not know, but he said for a big budget AAA movie, he is the first African-American lead composer, which is awesome. It's crazy. Sad that that's a true thing, but that's awesome. So we even talked about that a little bit, and genuinely fantastic individual. If you enjoy those conversations, please check it out. I love having those kind of chats and just getting insight, and obviously check it out on the channel. That would I would greatly appreciate that. Hoeg has continued to publish videos on his channel about his stroke journey. There's conversation with his physical therapist, and another one that either went up yesterday, as well. And as Dan already pointed out a little bit ago, next Saturday he's going to be doing a charity live stream for the hospitals that took care of him, helped him with his PT. Me, Travis, Dan, many others from Hoeg's community are going to try to join and at least stop by, hang out, and have a good time. So
yeah.
And then because of the 2 reviews I was trying to do this week, I did not get back to Romancylvania yet. So people keep asking me when I'm getting back to it. I get this review out the door tomorrow. I should get back to it this week. I'm trying. It's just there's only so much time in the day. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Chat, you've been awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of you. Appreciate the engagement. Appreciate hanging out with us. Travis, what else you want to shout out, brother?
Yeah. So first off,
sorry. By the way, I missed a super chat. I hate when I do that. I apologize. Joe Munger, when we started talking about the conversation and we got so deep into the details, I forgot to go back to this. 199 super chat says shout out to the CMA. Just poking that.
Clearly happy.
Yeah. Yes, poking it. Thank you, Joe. Sorry for the delay on getting to it.
Yeah, some things to shout out. Speaking of the CMA, one thing I wanted to point out that I just thought was funny, and this really is apropos of nothing, Ains. What do you think the CMA in their document calls people who own multiple gaming consoles? What do you think they call those people?
They have a name for it.
Yeah.
Multiple gaming consoles. I haven't looked at the document at all. I honestly don't have an idea.
Just what would you call it? What do you call people like that?
Multi-platform gamer.
Okay. They call them multi-homers.
Multi-homers? What does that even mean? They maybe
they find a home on multiple platforms. That's my assumption. I don't know that. They refer to them as multi-homers, and I was like, what the? I've never heard that in my life. Did you guys make that up for this document? And then somewhere in the document, it's like, yeah, we made that up.
I can see how someone who doesn't play games gets there in a stretch, but that's just a weird way to phrase it.
It's a weird way to put it, yeah.
Because it makes it sound like you're playing games in multiple locations or homes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
what I would think. Multi-homer is like, a well-to-do guy who's got a summer house.
Right. Like, he has an Xbox in his summer house and his, where he lives, his primary residence. Anyway, no, that's very weird.
I'm now going to start to spread that term on the internet. I'm going to start calling people multi-homers. I'll be like, "Oh, are you a multi-homer?" And then when they don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to be like, "This. Are you even a gamer? You don't know about the term multi-homer?"
Dude, we've got to do that. I'm with you. We're going to do that here on this show. Chat, come on, you're with us on this. Multi-homers.
And act surprised when Dan doesn't know what a multi-homer is. Yes. And then we can all we'll all just like pile on him and be like, dude, multi-homer's been around for years in the industry. Like, how do you not know that term?
Dude, yeah, I own the Genesis and Super Nintendo. I've been a multi-homer forever, man. Come on.
For sure, yeah, dude. Multi-homer life. Anyway. Also, if anybody wants to work on some art for me of a bunch of people wearing armbands with 60 FPS on them, maybe goose stepping around, feel free. It's just a suggestion. I mean, feel free to do that if you want. But yeah, what I'm working on is I don't have any reviews in the pipe. I'm working on previews and some other content. I'm going to be traveling a lot, going to Seattle to visit one studio and then going to LA to visit another one. And I can't tell you what those studios are or what I'm doing, but you
can once we're not live. So let me know.
No, I can't, because I don't break embargo outside of public chats.
Of course.
We don't do any of
that. Course.
That's actually real. I don't. So you can find all my stuff there. And then, that's it. I don't have a lot to promote this week. I'm going to be playing Jedi Survivor and catching up on, I'm going to do more. I will tell you what I think about Redfall tomorrow. I'm not reviewing it, but I will tweet about it because I have thoughts. Try not to give away your review with the Tony.
No,
voice.
I can't. No, I wasn't. Yeah. That wasn't. I was making that tone because I was trying to think about if I can say anything at all, and I can't. So just look for my review tomorrow. I'm going to provide a lot of detail into a lot of things about that game that I suggest you read if you've been looking forward to it. That's all I'll say.
Cool.
Shush came in with a late super chat, by the way, and said, "I own Steam Deck. Call me a tent dweller." Shoosh. Good super chat, man. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Thank you all again, chat. Like I said, you've been awesome. Anyone listening to us later, thank you very much for your support as always. Appreciate you. Share this out. Give us a love, give us a comment, give us a like. It always helps. That goes without saying. And hopefully next week, the full crew will be back. Hoeg was going to make it this week, like we said, and something else happened. So I think generally speaking, going forward, he should be here pretty much back to normal for the most part. Something just happened to come up this week. So we'll see. So thank you again. Have a good week. Enjoy your gaming, and we will talk soon. Until then, peace.